different formats.
I'll tell you
Just
what.
like little things, like little, you know, stuff in high school.
I'll tell you where it's RMS, there's SMS, I get land things. I know, it's terrible.
Yeah, but they'll look like those things.
I'm not very good at it.
For 390 minutes. Can't sit here for 3 hours. It's like the Superman 3 Braveheart. You can watch all Braveheart like. I'm leaving on the 27th.
Okay, so you just have to look for finance, maybe.
Did I probably owe you a date?
We'll sort it.
All right, it's 6 o'clock, so I will call the regular July meeting of the Board of Education to order. And I would ask everyone to rise and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I will now ask our secretary to call the roll.
Christopher Abel.
Here.
Viv Hansen.
Here.
Matthew Phipps.
Present.
Keith Shaw. Matthew Spalding.
Here.
Carrie Trask.
Present.
Tony Bustelka.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Next on the agenda, we have public input. I have 3 requests, and I'm going to take them in the order they were received. So, Mr. Stalvey submitted it online. I was hoping that was it. Sorry.
Oh.
Okay, well, we'll give him one more call after we get through the other 2 then. Okay, Mr. Hanson. Van Hanson?
How many minutes?
5.
Okay, I came to speak tonight against making a decision tonight about going forward with closing a school, one of our elementary schools. Our neighborhood schools are one of the strengths of MPSC. My children have attended or interacted in some way with teachers and staff of 5 of our schools, and they have all been positive experiences. Having a school that kids can walk to, see their friends in the neighborhood parks, and so on builds community. The schools take on and reflect the character of their neighborhoods, and they are an asset because of this to not only the district but the community at large. The teachers at each of our neighborhood schools are excellent, hardworking professionals. So I want to ask a few questions. How can this process be approved without an agreed upon criteria for evaluating the decisions ahead of time? In other words, do we know why we're making the decisions that we want to make ahead of actually going forward with the process so that we can evaluate those decisions well? Approving this decision and then asking for input from the various stakeholders is like trying to drive the car before it's been fully assembled. This leaves us open to inconsistencies, errors in judgment, and even blunders. This decision and the process to get to a decision is too important to be rushed through. This is the same kind of manufactured crisis and false sense of urgency that we saw with the adoption and implementation of Success for All. This decision was made in advance with only performative input from teachers and families, and then it was implemented in a rushed way, which led to poorly thought out schedules, loss of electives, compressed lunch times for elementary students, and added stress and subsequent low morale from our teachers. Needless to say, this proposal is much bigger and much more consequential than implementing a curriculum, and therefore far more deliberate decision making is required. Our staff has already registered an incredibly low vote of confidence for our current district leadership, and we've seen an out-of-the-norm exodus of good staff over the last several years. A hasty decision about closing schools will only lead to more dissatisfaction of staff, along with the anxiety that comes with threatened job security, and more teachers heading for the exits, and we absolutely cannot afford this. Likewise, if the decision is rushed, or if the execution of it is not done well, especially if the stakeholders don't feel that they are a part of the process from the very beginning, it is likely to create widespread frustration. And you might have families and students leave the district for private schools in the area, or they may leave the area altogether, which would create a vicious feedback loop of decreasing enrollment and therefore more struggle to maintain our facilities. Another thing to consider is increased class sizes, leading to flagging academic achievement as student to teacher ratio heads in the wrong direction. And behavior issues have been one of this district's biggest challenges in the last few years. That challenge, I think, will only increase as class sizes increase. No one denies that our facilities are aging and something does need to be done. Tough decisions may indeed need to be made, but if these consequential decisions are rushed into without a process and set of criteria about the desired outcomes set in place beforehand, I think we will look back and regret these hasty actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Our, oops.
Barbara Post, 825 Wilson Street, Manitowoc. I think open communication and collaboration in a positive environment occurs when all people are trained and informed, working together on the same protocols. People send their kids to people and places that they trust. Are you approachable and positive, willing to listen and engage no matter what the circumstances are? That is open-mindedness, and that is a true mark of a public servant, willing to explain all the options to the people and listening without making a decision. You need to help students and people conquer their fears so they can get through what they need to get through. So you don't have the future. What if I would have done this? What if I would have did that? Don't make them go into one lane. I have so many people tell me they don't question or speak up to the school board or teachers because it doesn't matter. It won't change things. Some even pulled their students out and homeschooled or sent them elsewhere. I've said it before that communication and collaboration are essential tools needed to build public trust, especially in a school system where you're going from kindergarten to 12. You need to have that positive feed. Informed communication is done in a positive, forthcoming perspective with no holds barred. You need to be able to listen to the public and hear what they have to say before you make any decisions. People are asking me, because I'm on the street, 3 times a day, I'm out on my bike, and I'm not afraid to go on the south side. I go all over on my bike, and people will pull me over because they know who I am. People are asking, what's going on? What are the state test scores? What kind of math was done this year? Why have we spent so much money? And why will we need to spend even more? What do you mean schools are closing? The public has a right to know what the public school system has done and what is coming. It's just essential communication and collaboration. And the school board needs to work together to be sure that the public is well informed. You can't just say, come on one night. You got to get out there, because I heard on the radio, and Mr. File said, we are behind in our communication. Well, people have AI now. They're all about communication. We need to get on the bandwagon and really promote this place. And educators are trained to educate and explain, so all know how to solve that one problem. You need to give them the essentials they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll make one last call for Ben Stalvey. Not here, and then One final opportunity for anybody for public input? Going once, going twice. Okay, therefore I will call public input closed. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have requests to amend. If any member of the board would like part of the agenda amended, rearranged to facilitate other needs you have. Seeing none, we'll carry on the way it is constructed. Next, we have the consent agenda, which has quite a bit on it, all the way down to J. So I would be looking for either request to remove things from the consent agenda or an approval. Yes, sir.
Could we remove the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting minutes, please?
Hang on. Let me see if I can. So A2,
Yes,
Right?
that is correct.
okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other requests?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Can I get the curriculum and instruction meeting minutes pulled?
A6. Correct?
And the financials?
The monthly financial report
Yes.
and the payment of vouchers, or just the financial report?
I think just the report.
Okay, certainly, sir.
And I have a few policies that I wanted to talk about. Want me to pull the entire, they're all kind of clumped together, so I don't know.
Under
Second
H?
reading or report? Second reading policies, but for.
There's so many of them. Yeah, it's,
A few, yeah.
So you want us just to pull all of H so that we can
maybe, I don't,
go through one
it
by
was
one?
just a couple that I wanted to talk about. So specifically the one on hazing and student activism. So 5516 and 5720.
So do you want to pull 5516 and 5720, or do you want to pull them all?
Those are the only two I wanted to talk about.
Okay. Anybody have any other ones they want to know? Okay, we'll pull those specific ones to address separately.
Thank you.
Okay? Any other requests? Okay, so now I would be looking for a motion and a second to accept or approve the consent agenda with the exception of A2, 6, B, and 5516 and 5720 of H.
I so moved.
We have a motion. We have a second. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. And opposed, say nay. Hearing none, those are all approved. Okay, and so we will, I think it's best to just take those up now.
Yeah.
Let's,
Just a point of information.
Yeah.
I believe the policies that Tony would like to have brought out are under first read, not under the consent agenda. Because those are on first read, which is further down on the agenda.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, those aren't in the second read policies. The second read policies are the ones that are on the consent.
Yeah, they're under new business.
Correct.
Yeah.
okay,
I guess.
So they can.
We can get to that later, but the financials.
My bad.
but that's okay because we approved everything in H except those two and they weren't in there, so it counts as approved. So we're okay. We're still okay. It works out.
It's true.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, sir. All right, so let's start with the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting minutes, and I believe that was.
Yep. So, Mrs. Erdman, I wanted to say thank you very much. I had a question that was brought up, and she was about insurance policies for the district.
Yes.
About actual cost value or replacement cost value. And she had emailed me back, or the rest of the board, with an answer. Did you just want to explain it real quick, and then I will give my opinion about that?
Yes, and I'm trying to remember exactly, I don't have the email up right now, but it's just,
So there's been tons of storms around the Midwest historically, so a lot of the approach with liability insurance has changed. And instead of being able to get like the full replacement value, I believe it is, it's
Replacement cost value.
replacement cost value, thank you. They're taking essentially the depreciated value of the roofs now, and that's standard practice as it's been like in Tornado Alley, areas in the United States that have a lot of storm damage. There've just been a lot of storms around this area, so that's just becoming standard practice, and liability insurance companies are taking such hits on claims over the years, so that's kind of crept up into this area.
So, so thank you for that information. I had asked that at the meeting and she responded to us to answer that question. My concerns being that, that is maybe what they are trying to do or pushing to do. However, I had reached out to a local, agent, and, that has been the standard for the last couple years. But if we would continue to do that renewal, it does open our district up to multi-million dollars of liability for all of our roofs in this whole district, for all the buildings, having actual cost value. We can make a request and we can provide them photos of the existing structures that we have. That is a route we could go down, just so we don't leave ourselves exposed to the multi-million dollars of liability of replacement cost value would bring us whole if we did have a claim. So as of right now, we would be losing the depreciation value of the roof of any of our structures. And obviously our premiums have gone up. But I would like to warn about that in the best interest of the district because of the amount of money that we would be exposed to if we did have a loss. And it would burden the taxpayers even more if we reevaluated that policy and made a request with information to try to get replacement cost value. God willing, if we did have an accident or a claim, we would be brought back to whole as a district in that event. So I just want to warn and let everybody know that we are at high risk of having a huge deficit if we would have a claim on our roofs in Manitowoc Public School District.
If I might ask for you to clarify.
Sure.
I think what you were suggesting is we get pictures so that in the event that something happens, we can show what the current state is rather than have insurance say, well, they were already pretty depreciated. Is that what you were?
No, so what I'm saying is that what Mrs. Erdman said about standard practice for the insurance companies to write the policies with actual cost value with depreciation, that is what they want to do. However, if the district would like to not have actual cost value, we would have to provide, photographs, or we would have to ask for the request of replacement cost value to our roofs. And that could be done. That's not what maybe some people would like, or the insurance company would like, because then they would be insuring the whole roof. But long-term benefit of the district, it would put the district in a safer position if we would have a loss. I mean, multi-million-dollar loss, because right now, if we renew this the way it is, the district will be getting paid a depreciated value of an actual cost value of that roof. And that wasn't that way not too long ago in this county. And we all went through a few hailstorms, and we understand what it was like trying to come up with a deductible of $10,000, or it's literally going up to $5,000 for people now for their homes instead of $1,000. And it pretty much puts people in a situation that they can't even afford to redo their house at that point. So all I'm hesitating about and explaining to the public is that if we just go with what the insurance company wants, because that's what they would like, that puts the district in a very vulnerable position if we would have a claim, because then we would have a deficit real quickly of the cost of those roofs to be replaced.
Can you get a policy like that
Yes,
now?
but we have to do some lobbying and working towards that.
Okay.
But there are still replacement cost policies. It's just, we're gonna have to do more work to ask for those replacement cost policies. Am I clear now?
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you make a motion to? research that and bring it back to the board.
So I'm just wondering if, I'm glad you found this concern, if that should now go back to the finance committee to look for solutions to this. You know, and put it on the agenda and then bring back the solutions rather than, I mean, during the committee, they can bring in somebody that understands this, you understand it. Make a decision or bring it back to the board so we can look at that information.
Sure, so I would make a motion to bring our insurance renewal process back to committee.
Refer back to committee.
Refer back to committee for further investigation to potentially rewrite the policies or look into getting replacement cost value for our roofs in this district.
I would second that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Think there'd be any? Okay, we'll refer that back to the committee.
That's good. Mr. President, I was just reviewing the previous request from Mr. Boselka here about the policies that he wanted taken off. And it does appear that they were not under second read, they were under mirroring, which is why they were found. So they're technically on consent, so if we wanted to pull those as requested, it was a mistake on my part for not seeing them under that. So I apologize.
All right, well, we'll, thank you. So we can find them and get.
We can find them. They're under mirror policy.
Okay. All right. So now I would be looking for a motion and a second to accept the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting minutes. I'm gonna practice that one this time. So we have a motion?
Second.
We have a second? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Hearing none, those are accepted. And now we go down to Curriculum and Instruction Committee meeting minutes. I believe it was you,
Yes.
Mr. Costelli.
Thank you. Yeah, nothing major, just everywhere my name was mentioned, it was spelled wrong, so I'd like to get the minutes updated to reflect the accurate spelling of my last name.
Yeah, perfect. A request to amend?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
And without any,
The content. line.
yeah, nobody's going to object to that, so I will move to accept the minutes as amended.
Second.
We have a second. Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, those are amended and accepted. Thank you. Thank you for letting us know about that. And now we go on to the monthly financial report.
You're right, that was me again.
Yep,
Yeah.
you're up.
Angela, I noticed on the report, it looks like going forward, you had suggested that we're not going to be presenting financials for June, July, or August. And I just, could you give us a little bit more color around that, just so people understand why?
Yes, happy to. And that's in many school districts. So right now, we've sort of done let's call it a soft close on June, because we have significant entries to make for audits. So we have, over $10 million worth of entries, $10 to $20 million that'll be logged in, into the financial statements as we complete audits. So when you look at the June ending amounts that are in here right now, they're not final yet. So, and Rob, our accountant had reminded me, he's like, remember, we typically don't do financials in June. I'm like, oh, that's right, we don't. So typically we haven't in the past. And then usually with July financials, we're just getting the year started and we're working through audits, and same with August. So that's where that would come from. Of course, if you guys still want them, we can provide them. However, it's just, you have to look at the information with a grain of salt. So looking at other districts in the area, I usually say, during the audit season, there are no financials. Payment of vouchers, we would still, of course, always bring forward, but, like I said, so happy to bring them if you'd like to see them. However, it's just that your primary ending financials for June 30 are going to be presented to you in the audit. Remember, we approved the Fund 46 transfer, I have until June 3rd or July 30th to make that transfer. I mean, that's where we're racing, you know, with the clock to finish final payroll for the year. This week, we're doing 2 payrolls, 2 AP runs, and that allows us to really start finishing the close of the year.
So I'm looking at this report, and another question I had is, do we know how we did all of last year's as it relates to our budget?
Well, overall, I mean, I anticipate we'll have some that we'll be able to transfer over to Fund 46, but that amount is tentative at this point right now, so well, I'll know more by next month, so.
Is it fair to say that we were within the operating budget for last fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay, so overall, when we look at the total spend for the district for the complete fiscal year, just so that I understand this, we were within the operating budget that we told the public we would be in.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good? Okay. Anybody else, any questions on that? Then I would be looking for a motion to either approve or accept.
Motion approved.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
We have a second. A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, those are accepted. Or that is accepted, excuse me. Okay, now we're down to H, and H has 2 sections. So under mirroring policies, you're looking at 5516, and I think also under mirroring is 5720. Mr. Tennis, could you just apprise
Yeah.
everyone in the room what we
Yeah.
mean by mirroring
Sure.
policies?
Yep, as you all know, given how far behind we are with our updating of policies, one of the strategies that we're using from the Policy and Personnel Committee is to really take a look at some of our existing policies and move them forward in a mirroring fashion, which essentially means that we're bringing forth the policy to the board as the same as it currently stands. So really, we're just asking you to pass policies in an updated fashion that we already have in place with very similar or the same language. And so what you'll see, for example, under the student hazing section, or 5516, is there was just one change where they added the sentence at the end about the district administrator shall distribute this policy to all students and district employees and shall incorporate it into the building. So again, these are policies that we currently have, that these recommendations are mirroring what we currently have so that we can get them updated in a timely fashion.
Thank you.
Yes.
And Mr. Vestelica, I know you wanted to address this.
Yeah, thank you. Sure. Chris, I was just reading through this policy and, you know, I was looking at section C and I was wondering, you know, it references the federal and state protected classes. And I was just thinking, you know, I understand the need to have that part in there, but given that that's such a moving target in the last year or last couple years with, you know, what's a protected class and what's not, I was almost thinking it might be beneficial for the district to consider just leaving it at that without getting into a whole bunch of detail, knowing the law is kind of still being worked out. And therefore, for that reasoning, I would like to make a motion to change the language in that specific section C to read, after that first sentence, or it says students or any group of students. After that, I would like to add characteristics protected by the federal or state civil rights laws, protected classes. So again, I'm just thinking out loud, if the law changes, you know, I think it would be disadvantageous for the district to be stuck with a policy that could potentially be illegal. It just creates a lot more work. If we leave it kind of vague in this situation, I think that it could actually play in our favor and create less work for us down the road.
Okay, so you were moving to amend it, so. Okay, then I will second your amendment, at the very least for purposes of discussion here. You've spoken to it. Was there anything else you wanted to say before I open up to the rest of the board?
I think like I said, just from a liability standpoint, if the laws change and there's more protected classes or some get removed, it just, it could expose us to unnecessary litigation. And, looking at it purely from a risk perspective, I feel that if we just say, hey, we're gonna comply with federal and state laws, I think that's the least risk position to be in.
Any other discussion?
What number is it? Can you tell me?
This is 5516, student hazing.
I understand what you're trying to say, Tony, but I think by making it vague, we're opening ourselves up also. By not following whatever the state and federal guidelines are at this time, we open ourselves up. When those change, we will probably change with that. But there are federal laws and state laws, and if we make it vague, again, we're opening ourselves up to being challenged because we're not protecting. So I understand what you're saying, but I will vote against it.
I don't know. I think that when we were going through all these changes before, the one thing that I said was to stick with exactly what whatever the laws were. And even though that nothing has been implemented before, I brought this up in the policies committee as well. And also, we've already seen just a recent decision came out on July 2nd. What is it, the 9th? 1 week ago, a federal court already overruled making changes to this for adding all that extra stuff in there that we were talking about and wanting. So right now it's like you said, it's a moving target. So if you say protected class, federal and state protected class, you are including everybody without actually putting it in there. I don't see how that would be a bad change. Actually, that would probably make less work for us.
Anyone else? I can see how clearly saying federally and state recognized protected classes assures that we're always covered by what the law is, rather than having to re-enumerate every time what those are.
I think that was
You know, so I can fully understand taking that approach with it. I would want to know if the directors have any concern with that kind of a change. It seems to me that it guarantees that we're covered.
So, I'm not a legal expert in any sort of way, but I did take a class on pre-law once, so I kind of feel like.
Animal House, thank you very much.
What I would say is this, I can only go based off of what our legal counsel has said. And later in this meeting, you will deal with a policy that is specific to Title IX. What the attorney said is very clear. He left some of this language out of that policy in regards to some of the definitions. And the reason he did that was because he said the law is the law. The Supreme Court has already ruled on this. And so you are required to follow the law. So following that logic and applying it to this particular language in this particular policy, I can only assume that that would be a similar argument that they would make. In other words, I don't think it matters whether it's in there or not there. We have to follow the law. And that's my viewpoint based on what our legal counsel had suggested with the Title IX policy that we will deal with later.
I think that was the intent of Tony's amendment, was to make sure that it's covered no matter what. And we don't have to continue to go back and make all these specific changes, because either way, we're gonna be following the law, which states all protected classes. And that labels that in there. It covers everybody. It covers everybody that the law, or they could change it as many times as they want. And this is a way for them to have that in there without actually going back and making changes, because it will be brought up every couple of months, because we're getting court decisions coming in and out of here like crazy. And we're not gonna get ahead on these policies like I know you want to do without making some sort of a statement like that.
Just to add to that, for clarification, if there would be a change in the law, it would immediately come to us as an alert from Neola to update our language. So whether we leave it vague purposely to try to avoid that problem, we're covered. Well, I should say, once we have everything updated, we're covered in that we would be told by them that we should be bringing forth the policy to the Personnel and Policy Committee in order to make those changes. So
Again, Lee,
I just
that's
wanted to-
exactly what I said.
Yeah.
That stops us from having to do this, and we're trying to get ahead on these policies. So I know we keep reiterating, but the thing is, we want to make this as easy as possible, and we're not getting ahead. This agenda that we have here is 3 miles long with all these policies, and even being on the policy committee, I'm telling you, this gets overwhelming. I think that's a pretty good amendment, but I support it.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed say nay.
Nay.
Okay, that passes 4-2. The nays are Mr. Trask and Mr. Hanson. Okay, let's take a look at the 5720, excuse me, student activism and expression.
Yeah, that's me again.
Yep.
So I don't know if maybe I just read this wrong, when I just saw the word activism, but then I looked down and then I saw the word, the options were to either allow it, which I'm sure we have to for law, right? And then encourage was the one that was checked. And, just really thinking that through, I'm almost wondering why we would want to encourage activism instead of just allowing it. So I know legally we have to allow it, but let me give you another way to think about it. Are we encouraging, do we have a policy encouraging reading proficiency to be at 95 to 100%?
I think it's implicit, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, right, reading.
Well, that's what I'm getting at is like, I just don't know if I agree with encouraging activism, because to me, that almost seems like it's encouraging, political activism. That's just what I associate the word activism with.
Depends on how broadly you interpret encourage. I mean, it's simply the opposite of discourage. I mean, and students should know that they have a right to be active in causes that they think are important to them, and kind of leave it at that. I think that I guess I don't see it as a like going out and kind of prodding them into being active. I mean, I wouldn't interpret it as that. I wouldn't interpret it broadly, but I would say, well, sure, it's the United States, for heaven's sakes, and if you want to be active in a cause that's important to you, we're not going to discourage that. As long as it's within the boundaries of the laws and policies.
And I don't think you have to discourage it simply by not encouraging it. I think you could allow it, which is the other option. Let me get Mr. Small.
I have 2 different issues. Actually, this is something that I missed. I'm glad you brought this up, Tony. I have 2 different issues that I believe are misleading regarding this policy, because in the title it says student activism and expression. But then in the actual wording of it, it sounds great. It is the policy of the board to encourage students to express their opinions and ideas, and all that sounds fantastic, but it's labeled underneath student activism and expression. I don't know, maybe it's the word activism that we don't like. I'm not trying to figure out why it does sound, but encourage and allow are 2 different definitions. And to me, that is not a mirroring policy. And whoever decided to put that on the mirroring policy was definitely misleading. That's the second part of the misleading portion of this that agree with me or agree with me not. Is allow and encourage 2 different words? Allowing something or encouraging something?
Yeah.
That's definitely 2 different definitions. That's not a mirroring policy. We'll have a discussion with that later if we decide this.
So we shouldn't encourage them to express their ideas.
No, I told you, like the wording of this, like the actual wording of it, where it says this policy, it's a policy of the board to encourage students to express opinions and ideas, take stands and support policies, publicly or privately, orally, right? I think all of that's fantastic. It's under in my opinion, it's under the title of the policy, student activism and expression. I think it's the word activism that maybe I don't like.
What do you think the implications of that word is?
Well, I think activism versus expression are two different things. I think activism can be labeled and misinterpreted, and especially in today's day and age, as opposed to student expression.
When I see activism, I just, maybe this is just presumptuous on my part, but I just kind of link it to like political activism.
Yeah.
And that's something we all like to avoid, right? And
Discourage
in our schools and.
political
Well,
activism in schools.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I would say that
we definitely don't want that in a learning environment. I think,
I mean, not in a democratic society? We don't encourage
well,
political discussion, debate, et cetera?
well, there's a difference between that and
Activism.
activism,
No, but
right?
it's
So,
it's
there's-
explained in terms of expressing ideas and, being engaged in.
There you go. That's exactly what I'm saying. Activism versus
Yeah.
expression.
Yeah.
Expression being different. You just labeled it and just.
But
You actually-
activism doesn't have to be like throwing bombs or, breaking windows or.
Well, I didn't even get to that part.
That part.
I mean, you went there, but.
It just seems to me, boy, it seems to me that not encouraging or not, by neglect promoting apathy is not a good thing in an educational institution.
I think you're saying that not encouraging, and nobody said anything about not encouraging or discouraging.
Okay.
It's allow versus encourage.
Right.
Two different definitions of the word,
And again,
and that's the only change.
Well, I would err on the side of, wanting students to be engaged in their own culture, and that, so.
Absolutely. Okay, so what I'm trying to get to here is a motion. So are we looking to move this back to the committee for consideration and discussion, not under mirroring? Are we looking to amend it here for?
And keep encourage in there. That could be an option, or we could just, I can make a motion to, I would just like to make a motion to allow it instead of encourage.
To amend it to allow instead of encourage?
Yeah, and I just think that it's really, we're starting to get out of our lane a little bit. And, like I said, when we have kids in our district where, last time I checked, over half of them aren't reading at grade level, I think we should make policies on that if we don't have them over stuff like this.
Okay.
We can chew gum and walk at the same time.
I'd like to
I'll
get through the
second it
motion.
for a
Okay, so we have a motion.
I'll second for purpose of discussion, and honestly, I was thinking you could keep encourage in there and just change the title to student expression. Or if you wanted to keep student activism and expression in there, we put allow it in there. But either way, it dramatically changes the meaning. So,
Sorry, I should
Yes.
just shut up, yeah.
Well, or request.
No, that's okay. I'm just being spontaneous, that's all.
Yes.
Some of the best things that have happened at our high school, at our middle schools, are students being encouraged to be active in something. You're looking at activism, I think, politically, and that's not. We just had a prom king at Lincoln High School with Down syndrome. Okay? That's something very unheard of, but there's a group of kids that are, I guess, activism, including kids with disabilities in the general student population. They were encouraged to do that by staff members, and they took it to a level that we do some pretty special things at Lincoln High School for kids with disabilities, including them. And that happened because of good staff members who said, hey, try this and do this and do this. That's activism. That's not political activism. It's teachers working with students to say, hey, let's make this a better place for those kids. And that's just one example. And that happens. So you can't take words and put them, Tony kept saying political activism. Well, That's one activism, but there's other activisms that change the world that are good, that have no politics involved at all. And if our staff encourages kids to do something like that, I think that's a good thing. I think that's a positive for us.
Like to make a friendly amendment that we strike this entire policy, because we already have a policy about encouraging students to be active in different things, extracurricular activities. This right here deals explicitly with expression and activism. It has nothing to do with, I understand, trying to bring in special needs and things like that. It has nothing to do with that. This has to do with supporting or not supporting policies publicly or privately, taking stands and things like that. We want to encourage that, not under the title of activism. You've gone a whole other direction with that. You're talking about putting words or definitions of words in people's mouths. That's exactly what you did here when you responded to Tony. This is very common sense. It's not that hard, but we do have policies that support students in being involved in extracurricular activities. So you just basically gave the argument that this whole thing is null and not even essential.
That's your opinion.
But what you've made is a competing motion, so you're gonna have to hang on to that until we address the first one.
Could you
Repeat, you made a motion?
You can scratch my motion.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
It was more of
I know.
a rebuttal to his lunacy.
Yeah, I would just, Biff, I agree with a lot of what you said. So I think it's great when kids do things like that, but maybe I'm just reading it wrong. When I hear activism, I think of Antifa, I think of, riots. That's what I think of. And maybe that's just a condition of, the world that we live in the last several years. And that's what we don't want.
I agree with that, but all activism is not that.
Right. And to Matt's point, though, like this clearly is not talking about like what you would.
Extracurricular activity.
And for the record, I think that's great. When stuff like that happens, that really speaks a lot to the hearts that our kids have and our community has. So I would fully encourage that. I'm just saying, let's be cautious about how things are worded and the meanings of things. And ultimately, that can direct our focus away from our core mission.
Yes.
Just a little point of information, not arguing either side, but the actual definition of activism is the policy or action of using vigorous campaigning to bring about political or social change. So that's
Change.
Yes, sir.
I just want to highlight Matt's point about change of law or school regulation in the pursuit of their advocacy through lawful means. So this policy is directed towards changing the law or school regulations. So it is political, it's not emotional. Social change, yes, I can understand your definition, thank you. I think you are, I don't want to talk for you, but my opinion is that it's worded terribly. However, I like the policy itself. I think, Matt, you said that there's a connotation with activism that's negative now. That's the result of a lot of things that happen. So I think that kind of maybe offends some people to hear that word now, but it does have many more meanings than just the negative. So yeah, that's my opinion. I'm okay with the policy. I just think it's worded terribly with the encourages. But I would be voting yes for it.
No,
No, you're deciding, okay.
I'm okay with what I think.
If you'll allow me, I would say that my preference is the word encourage. And the reason it's my preference is because schools have an important role in teaching our students. I see this policy far more important at middle and high school level than otherwhere, but still would matter at the regular grade. Schools have an important role in helping children learn how you advocate for something that you think should happen and do it in a way that is appropriate and respectful and productive. And I think when we look at how many of the conversations out there on the internet are the exact opposite of that, I think encouraging people to learn the proper ways of doing this are really important. So I don't think it's encouraging activism. I see it as encouraging the appropriate way to petition or to stand up for something you care about. Like, for example, I'm not suggesting this has ever happened or would ever happen. You're at Wilson and you're not allowed to wear green and you really like green, learning the appropriate way to be active about getting that rule changed rather than just, defying it to create trouble. Sure. I think is positive. That's my take on it. But there's nothing else, then I will call the vote. All those in favor of the amendment, vote aye.
Aye.
And opposed, vote nay. Nay. Can I see the nays? Okay, so that fails at 2, 4, and 4 against. So now, I would still be looking for a motion to accept policy 5720.
So moved.
We have a motion to accept 5720.
Second.
We have a second. Thank you, sir. We've had pretty good discussion, so I'm going to go right to the vote. All those in favor of accepting it, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay,
It was 5-1, Nate. I mean, 5-1.
good discussion. Okay, and I believe that's everything on the consent agenda, so we get to move to superintendent file and the superintendent's report.
Well, the first one we have on the superintendent's report is Angela has an update there. Angela, did you want to highlight some of the stuff that you had in your report there for the budget update number 4?
Yes, we had the budget update included in board book. Some of the stuff I sent through email regarding the equalization aid estimates. So it's that July 1 is always the day we get the estimate of aid, and that came in very close to what I have in the model. So that the Baird budget model, I use that on a regular basis, and so that came in very close. Again, as the email shared from WASPO from Mike Berry about the fact that it's an estimate, so it's due to change, and we report our actuals that'll be updated. Some aid things may change, especially with the situation with Milwaukee Public Schools, so we'll kind of see how that works. If that helps us, tips in our favor and gives us a little more, we'll see from there. So that's where we're at with that. I had just information about some community sessions that we'll offer regarding the budget. So I just have the dates in there, and we'll be sharing those with the community. And then I wanted to provide some updated tax levy mill rate projections, just as we start to dive into budget and then upcoming meetings. One thing I wanted to share was that when you look at what we shared with the community regarding mill rates, compared to what's happened because of the equalized value, the inflation on that, it's what, the figures are a little different as far as when you figure that inflation into there. So where we would be, if we were going to say is parallel to what we communicated with taxpayers, we want to stay as close to $6.80 as we could. Okay, so and that's kind of a target if you want to use that equal measure. Some of the major impacts with our vouchers per pupil aid, that we have to think about coming down the pipe, and then several different borrowing scenarios that we have. And I can follow up with more information as Jim gives his presentation on the building considerations, because I included some projections with that as well. So I wanted to keep my remarks brief on this, but big thing with vouchers is we had a 42% increase last year, so that's a net zero on our budget. We bring in the revenue, we expend out the same amount, but it goes to the taxpayers. So that has a large unpredictable amount that we don't know until October 15th. So any questions, I'll leave it at that.
Any questions? Would you mind if I just state when your sessions are going to be?
Yeah, fine.
Okay, so just for everyone, if you're looking for something really fun to do on Tuesday, August 13th, from 4:30 to 5:30, there's going to be a meeting. I don't know how on earth this is going to be accomplished in an hour, so I'm comfortable with this.
Yeah.
Where the title is Understanding the Revenue Limit state aid, tax levy, equalized value, and mill rate. So in 60 minutes, you'll understand all that. And then you can explain it to me, which I would appreciate. And session number 2 is going to be on Tuesday, August 27th, from 4:30 to 5:30, again, right here in the boardroom. And the subject of that one is understanding funds and major expense areas, salaries, benefits, supplies, equipment, capital expenditures, building and ground, food service. So in other words, all the different funds we use, so that when you go and read the budget, you'll understand why the different funds do different things. Again, probably better than me.
Hope is to keep it brief. Mary Blaha from Baird will be here with us and just still will have a lot of time for questions for people who want to ask their burning questions.
Good, good. And I'm glad you're doing that. I think that's a great opportunity to learn about the budgets, since it's really plural.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
The next item is director's report. So we have updates in terms of our department heads in terms of some of the things that they're currently working on. So it's information item to you unless you have any questions or would like any of the directors to respond to that.
I like the first paragraph a lot. I mean, some pretty much of a stimulating experience, and I'd like to know some of the hot ideas. I mean, I don't expect to get them from you now, but if you could just kind of
we'll
sit down and write up a few things that, because I every time I go to a conference, I come away thinking like, wow, I never thought of that. That's a hot idea. And I find myself in that same kind of situation sometimes on the school board, like begging for a hot idea. But so if you could provide some of that.
We did have other principals worked with their people that they brought with them on the second day of the retreat and typed up a summary for us. So we have some really great
Sure, that'd be cool. I'd like it anyway.
We'll put it on the next curriculum committee meeting and
Okay.
give you a report.
Yeah.
Anything further from the director's reports?
Just want to say thank you for everything you're doing.
What is a WRS rate increase?
And the state pension for.
Okay. I'm just not on all the acronyms yet after all this time.
The Wisconsin retirement system.
Yeah, Wisconsin retirement.
Take it as it is,
Yeah,
sorry.
I live on that.
Just in time for budget.
Good, good, good. Everybody ready to get on to the fun stuff?
Yeah.
Ready, sir?
I'm ready.
All right, so we're gonna move on then to unfinished business. The 8A, three-phase facilities improvement plan.
Thank you.
Legend begins.
President Abel. We've discussed this before. We discussed it in committee. We discussed it here. We've not come to a conclusion to act on the recommendations that have been advanced. I again created a 2-page trying to be concise in terms of those key points there. And I also have in front of you just highlights in terms of, we can get lost sometimes in all the detail. What is it that we're talking about? So sometimes when we say we don't have information, I want to make sure this is what we know. Are we in agreement or what's missing, so that you can make an informed decision. But what I'd like to do here is, and I have 3 attachments in, you've seen this before or it's out of the facilities book. And so the first thing I'd like to do before highlighting just those points, because, I'm assuming everybody's read this and understands this in terms of where you might be in terms of information provided. But if we look at table 1, and I labeled those, that's extracted from the facilities audit, okay? Now they've clarified in this that it is both deferred maintenance that has not been done, as well as some enhancements, but not those significant enhancements necessarily. And so facilities that's not been done or needs to be done, a roof replaced, okay? Versus something that's more of an enhancement, you could possibly live without it. And essentially the difference is 161 over 10 years of recognized reasonable need, okay? And so that's why I just want to make sure. So the one page is elementary, and phase one is really addressing the elementary needs. It's starting with that. And we have time to move into the other two phases. But phase one is elementary. So I just want to make sure that you understand where this information's coming from. So again, the difference between 100 million, 600, if you think about this. Now, I've asked Angela, and Angela, please chime in at any time here, okay? In terms of, I've asked Angela, you know, of all of this money that we're looking at, all of these costs here that are projected, and you know, hopefully everybody spent hours looking through that audit. But you really need to, you know, to have a good understanding of the condition of our facilities, because there's a lot. Our buildings are really old. And so we really need to understand, what are we talking about here? Because it's not one building or two, it's all of them. And so that is just where that's at. Now, we've talked about potentially of, could we, and I'll get back to those highlights, but we talked about one of the things that was immediately recognized with CISA 10 and my instructional leadership team. Over 10 years, we lost 1,000 students. We haven't done anything. We're still maintaining the same facilities for 1,000 less students. That in itself is an issue. And not only are you maintaining buildings, you're not maintaining them. And so that's why it's, you know, it's really one of the important things is recognizing that we have excess capacity that you're paying costs for. So that's just to make note of. So if you were looking then in terms of, we identified schools that were in better condition. Jefferson's our newer school. I mean, everybody agrees that's going to be part of the long-range plan, whatever that is. Monroe was identified as a significant school in terms of good shape, you know, less to do to bring that up to current, you know, standards in terms of meeting our instructional needs. Stengel, which was a decommissioned elementary school and used for other purposes, is one of our better buildings. And so that was recognized that, geez, we should get this back to an elementary because it's newer and it wouldn't take as much to do. So I'm only highlighting where some of this information is coming from. But so when you look at, for example, 2 schools that we had used, just 2 out of the 4. So if we look at the schools that are really keepers, Jefferson is considered a keeper, okay? Monroe is considered a keeper, and Stengel is considered a keeper, meaning that there are newer schools with less to bring back to life, you know, to service our students. But if you're looking at, for example, we had just used Jackson, you know, as an example of those 4 schools. So what schools are really old that really need to potentially be replaced? Okay, Franklin, Jackson, Madison, and Riverview. There, you know, Riverview is probably lowest on that list, but there's substantial issues there that, you know, geez, do you put all the money into, you build new and replace it? I mean, there's a lot of issues with that. What we want to do is start it though. So for example, before when we came up with $20 million of savings if we don't have to do the maintenance because we decommissioned 2 schools, you know, and we use as an example, Jackson and Madison, and we could have picked 2 of the other schools, you know, there's different combinations, but looking across, that's how much is targeted that you need to invest this money into these schools. And we're raising the question, you don't even need them potentially. So why would you do that? The other thing, you know, that we looked at is, and now you can go to maybe table 2. We talked about different options in phase 1, and phase 1 is really addressing the elementary. It wouldn't complete it all. And I would just highlight one of the things in terms of 2 schools that are pretty close and similar would be Franklin and Jackson, okay? We need one of those to service our students, okay? And you know, we picked, you know, probably, you know, which one is in better shape, but essentially what we identified was, you know, what would it take to maintain that for 14 or 18 years until, like Lincoln, we look in terms of totally rebuilding it or building new as a replacement. So if we're keeping something, we really have to make sure that it's functional and we take care of all that stuff. So again, just information to keep in mind when we go back to why the recommendation, what we're asking you to do. Now, table 2 talks about that in the context of savings. And so the first option, which we recommend, phase 1, option 1, even though we could make some variations of that, and we'll get into that a little bit more, but we suggested if we bring back Stengel, we could potentially decommission 2 schools. You know, again, you're substituting one for another, but essentially we'd reduce by net 1. There's been, you know, agreement, I think Angela would confirm this, that we've estimated the operating costs, you know, to run an elementary school is about $1 million. Utilities, principal, secretaries, grounds, you know, all that kind of stuff with a facility, that's approximately $1 million.
For 2 schools.
No, it's 1 school. It would be the reduction of 1 school, net 1. We are still operating, so we're suggesting going down from 6 to 5. Okay, we pulled a school into the mix as a sub 1 in, sub 1 out. Okay, but the reduction is only net 1 from 6 to 5. Yes.
Can I just stop you for a second? Can you explain to me, just frankly, what would happen if we don't do nothing? So what are we, from table 1, you're saying that it's gonna be 56 million if we do nothing?
Well, you know, again, there's, you know, you'll see down below their footnote identifies that you could, you know, see in some of this is more than really hard maintenance that really needs to be done. Some of it could be considered an enhancement, which could say, we won't even do this. We'll just live without that. You know, I mean, you'd have to go through the thing, and that would bring down this $161 million to approximately $100 million. Still a substantial amount. Now, I'll ask this question to Angela. That's $100 million we've identified in need. Meaning, how are you going to address this over the next 10 years? And I would ask Angela, how much do we have in the budget, in your forecast, to be able to take this on?
Well, just annually with the budget, we have, you know, a little over $2 million now, looking at next year's budget for maintenance and all buildings.
For the maintenance, not the custodial work, but the maintenance issues.
Correct.
So we got about $2 million that you could see that she's probably extrapolated out for her projections. You know, so about $2 million more a year. Well, I don't know if she's, you know, increased that. But $2 million is really low relative to, I mean, if you just take 100 million divided by 10 years, just as an average, you're talking about $10 million a year that you should have budgeted for this. And we don't. Now, we know that you could do some of this stuff out of operations, which unfortunately we've attempted to do over the years, and that's part of our problem. Or you go out for a facilities referendum. And we're suggesting here with the recommendation, it's a combination of things. What's worked against us is time. We waited and waited and done nothing, and the problem just gets bigger. So you know, going back to this, you're probably talking about $100 million, but you get that down to 60 million, 50 million. Well, you could probably forego something. So roof, windows, you can't. You know, we'd have to go back through, but you know, CISA 10 is, we could do any sort we want. They've identified it by, you know, high priority to, you know, I would say most of that 100 million is high priority, you know, into the 161, second priority, but still priority work that, that is probably recognized by my entire team, that this stuff is needed to keep us moving forward with our kids and creating a conducive learning environment. Yes.
I got a couple of concerns that I've been emailed and spoken with about, and I had a response from them, and I wanted to ask and say it outright, is this right? Because one of the bigger concerns is class size. What would that do to class size? But from what I understood from the presentation last with CISA 10 was our capacity is at a certain amount of how many seats or students we can take. So with rearranging, if we were to close any schools down, we have, even doing this, we will still be in excess. We'll have an excess of capacity, so that won't necessarily affect any class size.
Exactly. We don't see that, but I have Lee and Heidi comment in terms of just confirming that. Anything, Lee, Heidi, to relative to that? I mean, essentially, we're saying we got extra space.
And we still
We're just
will.
moving students and teachers to
And
a
we still
space in
will.
one school instead of.
Yes, so the capacity, again, just to reiterate, is currently based on next year's enrollment projections around 400 students. 400 students is a pretty large elementary school that's open. By going from 6 to 5, we would anticipate about 198 seats still open. And the issue with class sizes, the district sets class sizes by basically having ratios that we choose, that we put in front of our kids in terms of teacher-student ratios. Which a couple of our buildings are also AGR schools, which means we have to receive the monies that we do, keep them at a certain level. And then the other ones, if you would have referred back, I believe, and I don't know if I have it here with me, but when we did our presentation at the last meeting, I do actually have it here. You know, these were all based on early elementary class sizes of 22 students, which is definitely a range in terms of, you know, what we would want to see. The other thing that I would want to remind people about a consolidation is your staff really follow the students.
Yep.
So, you know, it doesn't change the number of kids that we have or the number of kids we need to educate in a safe and pro-social learning environment, which, based off of the information that we have, we can do in a much more efficient, effective manner. That was the point that we were trying to help you with. So I hope that helps with the class size question. But the district decides each year what those class sizes are going to be, depending on our enrollment. And we've had low class sizes in this district for many, many years.
Lee and Heidi, just to take it back to your presentation before, I think you were also conveying that there's a lot more efficiency relative to the return on your instructional time by doing 3-section schools. You know, so it really helps us in the delivery of instruction and making good use of time and resources.
That's correct.
Right, and that would lead me into my second concern that was emailed to me would be staffing, since this, you know, cutting jobs, that type of thing. I'm like, with the size of, keeping those size of the classrooms, obviously, and because we have room, those teachers, like he just iterated, it covers it, those teachers follow the students. But anyway, sorry, Matt, and then Matt.
I want to back up a little bit. So say we do nothing, and we use duct tape and bubble gum. What's it gonna cost the district next year to have all the expenses of keeping everything open? That's kind of want a hard and fast number if we just keep everything open the way it is.
Well, again, if you're looking at the elementary one and the secondary.
No, just the elementaries, if we keep.
Just in the elementaries, if you look at that page and on that spreadsheet to show what the savings are, you know, we have a 2-year total for elementaries of $7 million.
And it's 2 million we have in budget, well, that's for the whole district.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Go ahead.
You know, there's a couple things to consider. So like in the budget update, like what Jim provided here is a schedule of cumulative savings over time, is one way to look at it, okay? And correct me if I'm wrong on that, Jim, from just been misstating it, but you know, in the projections I put, originally we had talked about different dates, 25, 26, 26, 27. So the million savings will come in whenever we have that, but we also have declining enrollment, so we're gonna naturally receive less revenue. I mean, that's a piece of the equation too, you know, then your aid and everything, there's a domino effect to all of those things. So, you know, repeat your question one more time, I wanna make sure I'm answering.
What is the cost to the district to keep every single building open the way it is right now? And what is the cost to the students and the families for keeping it open right now? So say we do the same thing we've been doing, or not, I would like to remove myself, I've been here 2 years.
Yep.
But what was done in the past, we'll call it kicking the can. If we continued, if the board decides to kick the can again, what is the implications of the cost financially and emotionally for the students and the parents of the buildings that are obviously in need? That's a question. If we do nothing, is it better than doing something?
Based on what we have, information here, and you have to look at the elementary and the secondary, you know, in terms of what you need to be thinking about in terms of you have resources to pay for this. For 2 years, it was 7 million, so 3.5 for elementary. If you flip it over, 40 million for the secondary, just to do this deferred maintenance and things that should be done. So you could say $20 million for secondary in a year. So you're talking about $23-25 million that we have not budgeted for.
Okay, thank you for answering the question.
You know, but again, trying to progress through this elementary, you know, we can't do it all. And so, you know, that's why we started with elementary.
And I think just to add on to that, if I understand it right, Jim, with this proposal, if we were to move forward and as you are proposing here, it sounds like the net operating cost savings for the district and taxpayers would be $1 million per year. Is that right?
For operations, that means 1 million less of operational costs every year you would not incur. Then the other thing, if you decommission a facility, you don't have to pay that maintenance cost that we're planning and saying you need. And that's what we've been doing so to a degree for the last 10 years, we continue to pay for, well, we weren't even doing the maintenance. To a significant extent, we've just been allowing to accumulate.
And so if we're gonna save $1 million in operating costs, that's huge, our budget. And just out of curiosity, again, I thought at one point you said if for every million, or if we were to take on debt, how much could we get for like $1 million a year in the budget? Wasn't it like 10 million or something?
Yes, approximately 10 million for borrowing, correct. Right now with the projections though, I mean, when I looked at 20 million borrowing, 11.5, 20 million would be pretty risky, you know.
She did a $20.6 million projection, and that's what this one table is. You know, again, if you look over to the right-hand column, when you consider both the savings from operations, the deferred maintenance you don't need, you start seeing, and I put the payment that Angela had calculated, that would be to pay back that $20.6 million loan. You know, so that's in the left columns. Then you see I've taken off the operating. Now, they've, you know, just to be conservative here, you know, sometimes they say it could take a year or two because of transition costs before you get to that $1 million savings. So I, you know, trying to be conservative here, just said, well, in the first couple of years, we might only be 500,000. So that gives you kind of a net amount. Then if we don't do this maintenance associated with potentially closed schools, what might that be? And then the right column where it's black is that would be the net cost that you're really paying out because you wouldn't be incurring these other costs. And as you can see, it actually ends up improving your budget situation, even though we haven't budgeted for these costs, only to a minimal amount. But these costs still have to be incurred somehow if we're going to keep those facilities open.
Mr. Travis, thank you for.
I'm, you know, I'm going to be saying the same thing I've said before. I want to start off by saying the presentation by Mr. Hanson touched on almost all the concerns that I have. The main concern is that where do we get the money for this? You know, the $20.5 million. Can we pay that off? And then to go for referendums to, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars. Honestly, that's a heavy lift in a community like this. So I think we're starting on the wrong end of this whole project. I think that the buildings are in bad shape. There's urgency to repair them. There are real concerns about, in some cases, even the safety. But the thing is that I notice here that Jim put in, boy, if we buy this hook, line, and sinker, then we have a year to engage the parents, etc. So what the process is here is that we figure it all out. We buy Jim's proposal. We say that, and then we go and we just tell the parents what we're going to do and what we've decided. I think if we're going to have any chance of raising any money, having any support for this, that where we need to start, number one, is with the community. We have to tell the community what the situation is, not just go on the radio and say, well, we've got some real problems and this is what we're going to do. We're going to close 2 schools and we may rip down Lincoln and build a new high school, and we may decommission the 2 middle schools and have a new middle school. God, that is just gonna get us in the, down the drain. So I think that what we need to do is we need to tell the truth to the people. We need to tell the truth to the leaders of this community and let all the parents know and all the taxpayers be fully informed about the task that lies ahead in terms of handling our responsibilities to provide safe and decent buildings in which their children can be educated. And then we need to ask them what they think, what their concerns are. We need to send out some surveys. We need to have some listening sessions. We need to engage this community, win them over, and then proceed in a systematic way to raise the money incrementally. Because the last time we had a referendum, honestly, we got ourselves into deep trouble. Taxes went up on the schools 46%, and nobody was happy about that. And for the next month after the tax bills came out, everybody I bumped into, the places I go, to the Y, to the, to wherever, we're saying, wow, why that was a surprise, and we're not happy. We're not going to get this accomplished unless the people are happy. Maybe not happy, but well aware of what they're being asked to do, because it's their buildings, it's their system. And if we go into this and say, well, this is what we're going to do, and we have to do it, and we have to do it like, begin in 6 months, and we have to have a decision tonight, we've recommitted the horrible error that was made with the Success for All program. We didn't involve any teachers, any administrators, in asking them for their ideas. We just said, well, there's a crisis here and we have to move fast. With the result being not positive until, we got to where we are now. But we went through 2 years of, hemorrhaging teachers and administrators, of having a succession of really hostile and angry, I guess hostile and angry is the same thing, angry responses from the staff of this institution. So what we did is we really ignored the people who were going to be most involved. And in this case, we're going to kind of ignore or at least postpone until we've decided what has to be done. The people of this community who are going to have to, in the end, pay for this. The other thing is that I think, coming out with letters to parents saying, well, we may have to abandon Lincoln High School. Jesus, that reflects absolutely no understanding of this community at all. Lincoln High School, is to Manitowoc what Notre Dame was to Paris. I mean, people, it was the one thing that people all had in common in this community. They went to that school, they graduated, they formed relationships that were lifelong. They have the greatest graduation ceremony in the state. And you're talking already about wow, maybe we're going to have to rip her down and build a new one. I mean, you weren't around when Two Rivers wanted to do that. It took how many referendum tries to do that and then to sneak it by. I'm not one that wants to try to sneak this by, especially with Lincoln High School. So we need to be talking about a building problem, perhaps a significant crisis in the physical facilities of this school system. And we have to talk to the people about not tearing it down. We should talk, first of all, about devising a program, a building program designed to save Lincoln High School. And that in committing to saving Lincoln High School, we may be real smart to consolidate some of the grade schools, to save some money so we have more left over to do the high priority stuff that this community wants to have done. So I think we've already like planted seeds that invite negative responses. I think what we need to do is we need to go, you know, honestly, I mean, in politics, it's like, boy, when you don't know what else to do, you go to the people. You go to the people and you ask, you know, you have an election and the people will tell you in that election what their priorities are. I think we should go to the people first, build a base of support, and then proceed carefully and responsibly in taking care of the problem. Diane.
Mr. Hanson.
I guess I've got two questions first, but before I ask the questions, the school that we're fixing on the south side of Manitowoc, Jefferson, was rebuilt on that spot because it was a neighborhood school. They weren't busing kids to Stangl, which is why Stangl was closed originally, because it wasn't neighborhood. But they rebuilt a neighborhood school in the middle of the city rather than busing kids to faraway neighborhoods. Question: what if we borrow this money? I understand they want to put a cafeteria on Jefferson. What is the money at Stangl going to be spent on? The $6 million at Stangl. What is happening at Stangl with that $6 million?
John, you want to respond to that a little bit?
It's being renovated back into a standard classroom building. So it's being
$6 million.
returned, it's being returned to a elementary school.
Okay. We're not putting a cafeteria on that one, are we?
No.
No.
Okay. Number two, whose decision was it not to bring the public in when we started discussing this? Why was the public not included before plans were made on what to do?
We're discussing.
No, we didn't, Jim, we did not bring the public in when this started. A board member gave information to a radio station about ripping down schools. The former president, before she left, said, I have this vision of one grade school on the north side and one grade school on the south side. So there were discussions and decisions made. I want to know who decided that we weren't going to take public input. This is huge.
One, just some clarification, you know, in terms of we are bringing information to the board for your understanding, for your deliberations, for actions. A couple of things between Mr. Hanson and Mr. Trask. You know, first of all, we talked about Lincoln High School. We didn't say anything other than this is a significant disrepair. And we put that out because this is so big for taxpayers, 2040 as a second.
Excuse me, can I claim my time back? I asked a question and I want an answer to that. I want to know who decided not to have the public in on these discussions. The board wasn't even in on this planning.
I think you're misled a little bit, but.
The public was in on this?
No, I'm just saying that the way that you're wording the question, because with the facilities, strategic plans and the facilities updates and everything that we've done through CISA 10, I mean, I know that there was surveys and things that have gone out too, maybe in the past, even when you first came out or even before that. I mean, definitely not specifically about this specific plan, but we've been trying to get information from our stakeholders and everybody else for the longest time regarding all of this. So, I mean, definitely there's different plans. And then if you looked in, I believe, the last email that we received, that this is something that we do want to go and get information from the public.
Yeah, that's already decided. Yeah. It's decided what you're going to do. That's like saying.
I know, but you're throwing an accusation out there, but we're trying to, we're looking for.
Time out. When did we ask people in the Madison area or in the Jackson area, hey, what do you think about transporting your kids? What do you think about shutting down this school? What are your feelings on the direction the district is going?
you're asking for a heck of a lot of money from the taxpayers in this district, and we haven't taken their input. Now we're gonna take the input, now that we've made a decision, how do you feel about ripping down, closing Madison, closing Jackson, and doing that work? How do you feel about our plans? We're not giving them options. We're not giving the public options. We're not giving the neighborhood options. We're saying, this is what you're doing. How do you feel about it? That's not the way you spend taxpayers' money.
Well, should we be overpaying $1 million a year? Because that's what it sounds like.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. $1 million a year we're gonna save.
Yeah, right.
And then what are we gonna do? And we're gonna save 20 million, so that's 20 million plus $1 million every year. That's great. But if you rip down the high school and build a new one, which they did a whole radio show on after they got information on the grade schools closing, that's 220 million. So we'll get that million, and let's bring it down to 190. So in 190 years, we'll start making money. But we're gonna build, no, wait, Tony, we're gonna build a new middle school. Not gonna rip that down. So what I'm saying is, we need input from people. If you're building a new middle school and you're building a high school and you're closing schools, the first thing you do is you go talk to the taxpayers about it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but those are years down the road, like 5, 10 years down the road. We're talking about like this.
It's in the plan. It's in the plan.
Well, it's not set in stone. We're just talking about the plan, right? I mean, look, dude, pretend it's your money, right? Pretend it's your money and you're pissing away $1 million a year. Would you sit there for like 5 or 10 years and get public input on it? Or
No, I would get public input and try to change some things, yes.
We
had a lot of
Can I talk?
Yes.
So I want to just kind of pull us back to, I like to get the input of when you have a parent or a teacher saying, hey, we really got to fix this bricks are falling off or the floor is uneven and stuff. And like, so I've been hearing a lot of that input since I got on the board about, hey, our facilities are like, they're getting old, guys. And then that was like, just personal people contacting me. And then I'm like, hey, why don't we get a strategic plan? I didn't make it up. It was the previous board, but they're like, let's get a plan together. Let's do an assessment of our state of affairs. What's going on? Where are these buildings really at? So like, because otherwise it was just anecdotal of people saying the facility's falling apart. Oh, it's all in crumbles. And that was all fear mongering. But then we're like, hey, as a board, why don't we pay somebody to give us a true state of affairs? Tell us what's going on with our real buildings. And that's kind of with the strategic plan. And we were, when I was on the board, we were open and honest, trying to say, hey, community, we got to figure out where we're going because we've been hearing a lot of public input about saying, hey, the facility needs some dire repairs. So the strategic plan was based on public input and a state of affairs of understanding where we're really at as a community and our buildings. So then we got the state of affairs. We said, hey, let's get a strategic plan. We hired a company. And then that company asked us, hey, we should probably look at, Nexus or CISA 10 were our two options. And we kind of drove through that. Now we have Mr. John, right?
John Bergen.
John, sorry, but he's representing our owner's operation agreement of CC 10. And so we paid them to do an assessment of all the properties. And now we kind of have a real true assessment of the properties. And obviously, I'm just kind of highlighting though about what public input is and where the community is kind of been saying, we have problems and now we have evidence of the problems of the 250 pages. So I see that public input of, hey, we have problems with the facilities, we need to make a change. So I'm seeing that as my indicator, and then the results came back that are validated and they're not misleading or they're not trying to sell us something, a bad good, sell a place of goods or bad. So I believe what they're saying is true. And from the parents and from the staff members saying, hey, I'd like a updated classroom. So I've been hearing a lot of that, I'm putting it together. And now we're kind of at the problem of wrestling the consolidation or trying to save money. And that's where we're at right now. So I don't want to blow any of this out of proportion where, like, I don't want to say anything more about that, but I think we're kind of trying to listen to what's going on and make a correct judgment call for the best interest of the taxpayers and the parents and the staff, so that we have an environment that people are going to be happy about and proud of, that fits in our pillars of our strategic plan of having a destination district. So I don't know where we're hearing this, that we're misleading the public of not having public input, because I've been hearing the public say, hey, we need to look at our facilities and have some updating going on. And I think that's what's potentially trying to go, but we're trying, I think what I'm hearing is trying to be a good steward of the money that we have. And that's why I asked the question, what if we do nothing? What is the cost to our taxpayers? So maybe it is an option to do nothing, you know, kick the can down. That's kind of where I'm kind of at right now, where I've been hearing a lot of information, but I want to be true to, are we improving the district by consolidating? Or are we just, should we just kick the can down and should it cost more money?
Yeah, I know you've been waiting, so thank you for your patience.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm my understanding, because I look at this as, maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but it's really a multi-phase approach, right? And the first phase, you know, you guys are talking about middle schools in Lincoln, which is great. I mean, that discussion needs to be had, and certainly we got to reel in the public. I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying. But when we look at the elementary situation, you know, and when we look at the, and Jim, please, if I'm understanding what you're proposing, please, or misunderstanding, please correct me. But it sounds to me like if we move forward with this plan, we'll right-size our capacity more in line with our population and where the future trends are. We're gonna save $1 million in operating costs a year. And when you factor in that cost savings from the operating expenses, plus the deferred maintenance that we would need by keeping those additional schools online, like it's more or less, it's gonna come out to very close to cost neutral. It's gonna be about $3.5 million.
Well, 3.5 is to the good. It means that your return is greater than your cost.
Right, but correct me if I'm wrong.
That's if you're incurring all that.
It's gonna be about a wash with those savings, and we could solve the elementary schools with that.
And do some enhancements as well as the consolidation. I mean,
Okay.
so.
And then while we're doing that, is it plausible that we could, as Biff and Carrie alluded, which I think would be a good idea, let's start having that, you know, these listening sessions, whatever we got to do, because those are going to be much larger investments. So we could pay for the elementary schools basically through savings. And then we don't even have, that's not going to cost taxpayers anything. That's just going to be us being smart with our.
Just clarification, you know, with this, you know, for example, Franklin and Jackson are two really old schools. We need, you know, and there's 4 schools that we're talking about that are in really bad condition, okay? We still need one of those. And, you know, so that's that cost, for example, in, that we put in there, that we've got to make this last 18 years until we come back to say, it's time to tear it down and rebuild it in its place. Because it's, you know, your return is not going to be there, you know, but we can put a lot of money in that just to extend that without an enhancement. You know, we're not putting an addition on that. It's just to make sure we can operate that school. Okay. So you're right, Tony, this pays for itself.
Okay.
Then into that secondary, you know, that's obvious, and we start getting involved, but even the elementary suggests, we're talking about this closure, if the board wants to go down that road, not next year, in 2 years. You know, to start thinking about 3 years out, you know, then you're looking at a whole different, you know, potentially redesign of everything.
Right. So I guess from my perspective, and again, I come from a world where if I make a mistake, I go out of business, right? So I don't have the luxury of having infinite money from taxpayers. So I approach, you know, spending their money a little bit differently than some of you guys probably do. But I think we need to move with a little bit of urgency in addressing that operating cost savings, because that's huge. That's $1 million a year in our budget that we can get back. We have more capacity now than what we need. We could literally fund it through savings, right? Which is almost a slam dunk for us. Like, that's not gonna cost taxpayers much out of pocket, if anything. And we can work towards building that goodwill that you guys are talking about with the community, which I agree that we need. If we're gonna, eventually, we're gonna need a bigger operating or capital referendum. That's unavoidable, right? So we might as well start building that case now. But to scream the sky is falling over what seems to me like a sensible and prudent plan, I don't know. I'm not seeing it.
Mr. Spalding.
Yeah, I was just gonna play off a little bit what Matt said, because he kind of articulated what I said as well with all of the planning that we have done for this. And I mean, it's not like this is coming out of left field, which is kind of where I'm getting from some people that, you know, where is this coming from? Or we haven't sought any input. And even in the letter that you sent out, planning to hold a community informational meeting in August, when families are back from their summer vacations. We can share our recommendations and seek input from all stakeholders. I mean, I think this is very transparent and seeking community input. I see the urgency of getting started on this for that operational savings. I also have had several, even leaders of the community, text me and talk to me specifically saying that it may be in your benefit to, you know, give people some time to digest this information. So I'm kind of torn with it, to be honest with you, but that's where I'm.
I want to say that I agree with almost everything Tony said. I think you know, it hasn't come out of, you know, it hasn't come out of the left field or anything like that. I mean, we've known for some time. Any of us who've been around and looked at the buildings and listened to the ceilings fall in Lincoln, you know, so we know that. I'm just saying, you know, I think we have a basis of real agreement here. I'm just talking about how we need to sell this. Rather than unilaterally saying, this is what we're gonna do, do you like it or don't you? Oh yeah, well, we'll bus your kids, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I really do think that we have to be partners with this community in a way that, you know, that we weren't partners with the staff here with Success for All. I think that was not a good situation. I don't want to create another difficult situation. So, you know, I noticed that there's like, what, 4 recommendations here. I would say there should be a 5th recommendation. The 5th recommendation should be how we involve the public.
You mean like 3?
Like 3?
Yeah. Where it says, evaluate, recommend schools to consolidate for.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of 3 either, but I think that, I mean, I think that just leaves like way too much latitude for the superintendent. And I think that he, you know, I don't think he's sensitive enough towards the, you know, the community engagement in these things. And I think that's been pretty evident. So I do think I think Tony's right. I don't think we should take years to do this. I think we should look for the savings, et cetera. That should be easy to sell, right? That should be easy to sell. We should like talk about being more effective and efficient, guaranteeing people that if we do shut down a grade school, it won't result in increased class sizes. I mean, I just think that we can't be too esoteric about this. And I don't think that should be something that the superintendent doesn't want to do. I mean, you know, I think the superintendent ought to be speaking, you know, in terms of, well, what do you think? You know, these are your schools. You know, I want to, and you know, as Matt says, we've got anecdotal evidence that people want stuff done. But I don't know. I mean, when the audit came out, I was stunned. I was stunned by how big a lift this is, how much it's going to cost. And I have looked at the audit, and there's some things in there that I think we should discuss about not doing. I mean, I think, you know, we're looking at the macro right now. I think we need to look at the micro. And I think there's a lot of things in those lists of stuff that have to be done that could be done in-house at much cheaper costs by having our carpenters and bricklayers, et cetera, you know, take on some of that work. I mean, but you know, adding like a, you know, $4 million cafeteria to Jefferson is like, holy geez, do we really need that? It might be nice, but you know, I think we have to say to the people, here, if we were going to do everything, this is what it's going to cost. And guess who's going to be shocked? Sticker shocked. And we'll say, well, we can We can reduce that overall cost if we, maybe consolidate a couple grade schools, save some money there, if we can eliminate this or eliminate that. But you're not talking about like shutting down the middle schools. That's just really bad marketing. So I think we need to have a fifth recommendation on how we involve the owners of the school system in this. So, yeah.
Are you raising your hand, or are you just?
Well, no,
pointing out?
I want to say I agree with you, Tony, on the middle school and the high school. My concern is we didn't do that on the grade schools. And you are moving kids from neighborhood schools, putting them on buses and moving. That's not gonna fly well when people had no say in doing that. Okay? That's 2 grade schools you're shutting down and moving out to Stangl, and they'll be bused. Most of the kids will get bused. Okay?
Why is that such a bad thing? I mean, people talk about buses like they're like the worst thing ever. I like going on the bus.
Because a lot of kids and a lot of families for years in this community walk to school. That's why Jefferson was rebuilt where it was, because it was a neighborhood school. I'm saying, why not do the same thing you're saying for the middle school and the high schools for the elementary schools? Let's get those people together and let them have a part of this decision before it's already made, and now we bring them together and go, hey, this is what we're doing for you.
Well, I think.
And the decision's made.
Economics, right, John? I mean, Stangel's just in a better condition, right? So it's gonna cost millions and millions more. And so we could have a long drawn out conversation with the public that's probably gonna arrive at the same conclusion.
And who's paying the economics to do that? The taxpayers are paying it, so you better get their support if you're gonna do it.
Well, I think we're being good stewards with their money. That's my point is, you know.
That may not be the
If we're over capacity,
go to that school. The people in, we're not taking their thoughts at all. We're just saying, no, we know what's best. We're doing this.
And we're doing it fast, yeah.
Yeah.
well, it costs money to not do it fast, right?
Yeah.
So and maybe we could, we can work on the messaging, right? But to me, it's like, these are little things, right? Like, again, kids getting on school buses, that's normal. That's not like anything crazy. Like, kids get on school buses every day in this district. They've been doing it for years, right? So I don't think that's gonna be something that's insurmountable for our community to deal with. And ultimately, if we could show them the economics behind it is justifiable, that's gonna be the big driver. I feel.
But Tony, the economics, you're right about, but there are other aspects of doing something this large to a community. I mean, there are people that, I mean, were you around when the city decided, that 8th Street was gonna be 2 ways? I mean, and of course it made all kinds of sense, I guess. But a lot of people didn't care about, the argument that was being made by the city council. So I think if you're expecting to get, $200 million out of this community, you just better take them into consideration.
I'm not suggesting we don't. I am. I believe by acting as someone that's, concerned about the overall spend of the district and addressing that with urgency, I'm acting in their best interest.
I just said there was more to it than economics, that's all.
Right, and I would agree with that, but
Yeah.
that's a big part of it. So if we could save $1 million and your kids might have to get on a bus, that's probably worth it.
Can I say one thing quickly? I just want.
Is it super quick?
It's quick, yeah.
Okay,
That's what,
because I have a question.
I do remember walking from the mobile home park to get to Stangl Elementary School. So there is a neighborhood in that area as well, and hopefully more eventually. So, but not everybody's gonna get bused. And a lot of that busing is because that is our northern border. That is Rockwood and Cassuth. It's our exposure to the rural children of this district. So the neighborhood school, Monroe has the same story to all of our Newton students, where I went to school as well. A lot of those students are bused in on the south side of our district. So that argument is important, however, not the most important thing when we have a neighboring of our northern border and the area that it's in as well. So I keep hearing that, and it's like, it doesn't make logic sense to me.
Okay, well, I'm gonna jump us back to
Yeah.
the information part of this, because I have a very specific question about table two. I want to understand table two, and table two has under year a series of years. The way I think about school years, because their financial framework runs from July 1st of one year through to June of the next year. So we usually refer to them under 24, 25, 25, 26. So where you have 2025, is that year 2024, 25, or is that year 25, 26?
Well, so when we're looking at a consolidation, okay, if we were to consolidate, it's not next year, it's after, that would be 25, 26 school year.
Okay, so the first year you're starting with is year 25, 26. Okay, just if I make a note on that, then I can extend that down for the rest of it. Sure.
So just, if I might just go back through, just to make sure that I'm identifying points that I think are significant here, and that's why I created that one recap, and I'll kind of walk us through that. Let me identify the only urgency that really came up here regarding this move is if we want to do some significant startup work, not this summer, it's too late, but next summer, and that window's closing. So, we can extend this out over another month, and we lose that opportunity. That's why it was important for me to make sure you had this information. Now, very well, you might say, I want more time. Well, I just need to know that time is money. And you can make that decision. It's not my decision, it's your decision. I'm only making a recommendation, okay? With that, there are a few alternatives to what I'm recommending in terms of phase one, option one. The two critical things on that recommendation is Stengel and Madison. To be able to accept, to redo that work inside to accept those students. The other two, we could pare that back to only critical safety needs. So we could cut this back. I mean, you can see $11 million for those two schools. Jefferson, we could cut that down to 600,000. Franklin's in pretty bad shape, so we're not going to be able to cut that down so much. So we could reduce this, even though I'm showing you there's a return on this that actually, it's almost like paying for itself because you're not going to incur costs that you might otherwise have to. So let me just walk you through this, okay? And again, I don't need to elevate my voice. I'm not sure where we are. I'm only trying to make sure that we understand the facts here. As we see this, in terms of this is largely an economic condition at the start, because we're spending money that we shouldn't have been spending for some years now. And so how much longer do we want to wait? But that's a board decision. That's, just helping you with the information. So starting out with, the first thing was consolidate elementary schools. And I think we've recognized that's going to save money. And any savings can be then applied towards some of this other expense in terms of how we're trying to figure out how we're going to fund this. So in parts, the savings starts helping be part of that revenue stream. So going down just to highlight some things, the net is 6 to 5, even though we're talking about 7 schools because we brought Stengel back into the mix, but it's only reducing our elementary schools from 6 operating to 5 operating, okay? So we're 1,000 fewer. We just haven't done anything over the last 10 years other than watching the enrollment decline. We haven't done anything to make that decision about facilities. So we need 1 less elementary schools. We can't justify that need. That's why I'm bringing it to your attention. Immediate savings, 1 million annual, and then the additional savings, which is in that chart, $20 million year by year in terms of this is stuff that's targeted for those schools that if you're not going to operate, you don't have to incur that cost. And that's where some of that offset. Additional savings if you sell the building. So you could add another, and I'm being conservative, 1 to 1.5 million. I'm thinking here of the taxpayer, but I'm clearly, I've been there at closed schools and I recognize we tell parents to invest in their schools. And then we say, well, we need to close it, for the betterment of their kids. Right. It's hard to understand that when you tell them to rally, behind their school, but that's just a reality. It's an economic issue here largely, in terms of making sure that we're good stewards of public money. Savings offset the backlog of deferred and projected maintenance, sufficient planning time. And we're not talking about closing next year, we're talking about closing, so in the fall, when everybody comes back, we get them together, we got 4 schools that are, you're in our worst shape. The board's made a decision, if they make this decision, to save money and reinvest it back into the schools. And we would be bringing that to their attention and then saying, here's the pros and cons of our analysis, this school versus that school. And get their feedback in case we miss something. We come back to the board with, confirming our recommendation or adjusting it because we got input that we might have missed. So, but we spend time to be able to do this. To have this all up front without the board's consideration and economic, again, I apologize for this, but I think that's one of the reasons you were hired, to recognize, some of the implications of running schools, both from the service end as well as the financial end. And so I feel like you need to be the first to be able to understand something before we start taking it to the public, without some type of logical procession. And again, we see time. So then it's moving down into, okay, so what I'm recommending phase 1, because I think the evidence is pretty clear. It almost takes care of itself. However, if we really want to consolidate, the 2 most important is Stengel and Madison, and let's see what we can do to pare back those others. Even though I'm, again, you got fund balance you could use, you got some of these offsets and not having that incur these costs. So I in some ways, unfortunately, think it's a no-brainer. I'm not saying that doesn't have implications. But then moving down in terms of Jefferson's the newest school, $4 million to complete and enhance to create a model school. But again, let's not create a model school. Let's not find something that we can sell in terms of why we're doing all this to make better schools. I mean, that's okay. Let's defer this and bring that into next referendum, or maybe it's 3 referendums, down the road. So anyways, just, Franklin and Jackson, $1 million to maintain for another 18 years, meaning Franklin or Jackson, if we're using one of those, we've identified it's $1.6 million to get that back into operating shape. Just to make sure that we can keep servicing kids. And that's not to put an addition on it, because we see that we're going to have to tear that down and rebuild it in that place or build a new one somewhere else. But that wouldn't be until 2040. We recognize the taxpayers are only going to be able to take, so much at one time. Just because we waited, we can't expect them to solve it overnight. So again, the savings more than offset borrowing costs over 10 years. We actually do move it into a 3.6 to 4.2 budget surplus, meaning you just reduce your cost burden, by that amount of money. So what happens if we postpone a year? Well, delay school consolidation by a year in the respective savings. So the $1 million to $3 million, you lose that for a year. Okay, now it complicates things because you're bottling up some things. Okay, how is this going to impact the referendum that we want to go to, the first one? Are we going to kick things out of that and move them out later? I mean, we can find great reasons to kick this can down the road, but I think we're going to have a reality check, and I think it's now, but you might disagree, and that's okay. This is your decision. I'm just bringing a recommendation with some options. The last one is alternative, as I mentioned, postpone Jefferson enhancements and Franklin Jackson, essentials. Only take it down to the bare minimum. I think we are looking at $600,000, to complete the essentials with Jefferson. Franklin or Jackson are much more significant because there's really some more heavy work in that. Again, I don't have all the details. I've got John here, but this is complex because we've got 10 years of accumulated problem, that we haven't addressed.
What are we doing on this?
So I'm letting him finish the presentation.
So then going down, so that's where I'm saying, what are we gonna, if we're gonna choose to consolidate, then we have to make sure we're taking care of Stengel on that. So it goes with 1. And then 3, in the fall, meaning when everybody comes back, we take and we make pros and cons, go to those schools that are impacted, say, this is our analysis. The board's decided to reduce, our elementary footprint from 6 operating to 5 operating to save money and to pay for some of this future expense. So I see time to do that, to redistricting. We met with transportation. They said, no problem. In fact, they say it's a pretty much stop, and a lot of people will be able to ride the bus where they couldn't before. So they could actually be, pleased. And then going into the last one, we've not budgeted for any of this, except for the 2 million that Angela's, I would not have recommended necessarily the pay increases this last year if I knew we had a significant issue of budget on hand. So what you also have to understand, if you don't act, you potentially are going to have competing priorities here that you're going to have to get your arms around. And I'm thinking the longer you delay this, the more you're going to be faced with those decisions. And I don't think you're going to like those decisions. And just as an example, a 1% increase just in pay, not in benefits, is 400,000. We're labor intensive, so most of your reductions at some point in time, if you're going to have to do facilities, you're going to have to forego something, will have a staff impact. So again, when I'm saying in budget, you need a contingency plan. We need to start planning, how can we reduce our budget? To be able to take on some of this work in the interim. And we need a backup plan if a referendum fails. We should have had one at the last one. We didn't. We said, well, we'll have another year to go at it. That was not good planning. We should have known, not to leverage that against the community, but to understand, what are you going to do if you don't have the funds? So that's my spiel in terms of trying to cover the bases.
I think this was a very thought out presentation. I understand that true hard facts are not very warm and fuzzy to everybody here or myself, but it's quite clear we need to make at least a choice about this, and it needs to be on record which way we kind of want to go as a board. And that's fine. We can be happy with the results or not happy, but I'm prepared to make a yes or no vote on this because I declare what I think my constituents want, and it's for me to operate, not just kick the can down the road. So I will be voting on this at some point, maybe, or maybe I won't be if it does get kicked far enough. But I am prepared to make my vote known to everyone here.
Just one clarification again, with John, help me out here. To do work next summer is what is causing this to be brought to your attention. And we have about a week left, and then you start risking wanting to do it, you can't, or you can't finish it. So John, you want to just add any clarity there?
We're coming really close to not having enough pre-construction planning time to be able to put that shovel in the ground next summer. And we do need to take the time to put all the detail behind some of the general scope numbers that we use to forecast what these expenses are. So for us to get an architect, for us to get those detailed plans developed, for us to bid a construction contract, we really need to move forward by the end of this month or early next month, or that timing's all in jeopardy. It can still happen, but the chances and the risk that the district's taking increases every day, being able to do construction, especially to the extent of this option one that's listed or some modification of option one. We really need to get going now. Someone brought up the comment on the 20-year plan about the schedule. You'll also see in the schedule for phase 2 for referendum planning, that's to start in August. And part of that plan is to bring the community in and get them actively involved in that referendum that wouldn't be voted on until 2026. So even though these issues are tight and we've got a demand saying, do you want to do construction next year or not, push it off another year, we do have some of the components in this 20-year plan that I'm hearing discussed tonight, which I think is important to bring up. As far as modifying options, I think Jim hit it right on the head. We don't need an addition at Jefferson. We can pull that cost out. We still then have the opportunity to do the consolidation, which is really important in trying to gain those operating expenses. When we did our audit, we didn't know that. We didn't know that even after we did the audit. We didn't know whether that consolidation was even possible until we worked with Lee and Heidi and Katie. And again, to be at that meeting, they brought some of those ideas to us and they just fell right into where we were at with the conditions of the buildings. And again, you weren't there, but you need to know that. So I think our 1 to 2 year plan that we hoped we could write an audit on quickly became a 3 to 5, quickly became a 5 to 10. And when we had the full plan done, it was a 20-year facilities plan. I mean, it's the only way we could see all of these things that we feel need to be done are done. And knowing that it's gonna take time, it was a long-range plan. That's what was developed.
Just have a point of truth I want to clarify here. When Mr. Trask said that we would like to try to have stuff done in-house, I want to say thank you to our operators agreement and them agreeing to let us be able to navigate what we want to do in-house and not. In the previous advertisement on the table was Nexus, was not letting us have the flow on contract-wise. So I think I don't want to speak for you, but I think what you said was incorrect about us being able to do stuff in-house. We have the ability now to do things in-house. Yeah,
That's what
but
you
you did
said.
not say that. No, sir. Sir, you said that you'd like the work to be done in-house.
Some of it, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm saying we have the freedom to do that with the operation agreement that we have with CISA 10. So I would like to point that out to be the true fact that we can do
I
it
didn't
in-house.
imply that we couldn't. You know, I recommended, I sort of suggested that you may want to look at that.
We are already in place to be able to do that now, and I want to clarify that is the truth.
I don't know if I want to address this to you, but is there an alternative way of doing this? I mean, I realize where we are, and I think like, okay, well, the recommendation in order to get the finances to, as you say, put the shovel in next summer is to consolidate a school. And I understand from what Lee and Heidi did that, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But, as you know, I'm precautious about being too presumptuous with the people's property. So, but is there I wouldn't want to, I'm not going to vote for recommendation 2, 3, or 4. But I probably won't vote for recommendation 1 either. But I realize that, we need to do something in order to start to move on. Is there an alternative way of doing that? Maybe,
I think
Lisa, yeah.
very important to remember is, the operational efficiency and savings is very important, but how we approach that, we have to be very, very careful. Most districts do not use Fund 38 anymore to fund projects because it takes away from your operational ability, or your operational general funds. So we have to just be very cautious with that, especially because we're operating under an operational referendum that we only have for 4 years. So we talk a lot about the expenditure side, but there's a very obvious reality that our operational referendum could potentially not be approved next time. And then we're gonna have even more to cut, which is a grave danger too. Out of 40 districts that have Fund 38 and 39 debt, over 82% of them have Fund 39 debt. So, and that's where it's referendum approved, communities brought in, and they vote on that. Would never disagree that looking at our finance operational efficiency, we need to, look at ways to consolidate our footprint. But borrowing $20 million over a 10-year period would be very, very extremely risky. And the board would want to think very carefully about doing that.
Wouldn't it pay for itself though?
Huh?
Wouldn't it pay for itself though?
Well, you have decreased enrollment, so you're gonna have less revenue coming in. You're gonna have, you have just other expenditures that come.
Right, but it's still gonna pay for itself.
Well, you're decreasing your amount that you have to improve in your properties, but overall, you have to look at your total financial picture, and that wouldn't be the case.
Maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I'm reading, it's almost like a net wash. It's gonna come out to about $3.5 million.
What Jim has there though doesn't include aid impact, voucher impact, enrollment decline, a lot of variables. So that's where.
I don't think that would really impact the the other costs. But-
Tony, some of, you know, in terms of what you're referring to, and again, you know, what we've identified is we haven't budgeted for this. Okay, and so the question comes in, can we just not do anything with the facility so we don't have to incur any more costs? And I'm suggesting you can't. So that's a cost that you reasonably should be thinking you're gonna incur. You know, you gotta find the revenue, and a lot of that, I believe is in the referendum. But I also believe that we very well could manage this and then not having to incur expense with those facilities. That offsets that.
And you have to keep in mind too, if we do this borrowing and focus in this area that doesn't take into account all the work or even just investing in Lincoln in the middle schools in order to keep them operating until we're able to take action on them. So,
One of the things in the plan, going on to the point that Angela just made, you know, with Lincoln High School, minimal is being put into that, only critical need. Because we see a need to totally reconstruct that building, you know, which would take a lot more, take a huge referendum, and we don't see that until way down the road, 2040.
I mean, could we borrow $4 million or something like that for next year?
that would be much more manageable
Yeah.
for the district, you know, even when you get around that 10 million mark, and more.
I mean, we could,
Those would be the absolute needs.
and then if we can sell the consolidation thing, then we get the savings that Tony refers to, but which isn't, you know, an automatic. I mean, I don't know why we're being, you know, fed more than a full meal here. Whereas I think that, yeah, we need to get going. We need to prime the pump. We need to, but I'm not prepared to do an affirmative vote on recommendation 2, and I'm certainly not, you know, have the confidence in the process to do 3 or 4, but I'd like to see an alternative to that would allow us to proceed with doing repairs without, you know, without selling the farm, you know?
Recommendation 1, I'm seeing is going from 6 to 5 elementary in 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, we got an immediate savings. We're not borrowing. We got sufficient planning time to engage parents, select schools, plan routes. I don't know. I motion.
What's the
we approve
deadline to
recommendation
make that before we miss out on savings? I mean,
For, you know, to be able to consolidate in 2 years.
Yeah.
We would have to make that decision in a week, you know, I mean, John was saying you're risking, I mean, we might push this into next
Yeah, we need
month.
two summers of construction.
okay,
to
so
do the
that's,
consolidation.
my point in bringing this up, guys, is, you know, that's, if you break through the math, right? $1 million a year, $250,000 every 3 months, $83,000 a month, right? So,
I know.
like, this has to happen, dude. Rip the Band-Aid off, right? Get it over with. Like, we can make that decision now and let them figure that out.
We did that with
That's why we vote on
successful
it,
law.
and the public will know our
Yeah,
votes.
I'd like to make a motion,
Please. I've been waiting. I just said so. Motion recommendation 1.
I would like to make a motion to approve recommendation 1, to consolidate the elementary.
Can I just add,
Can I get a second on the motion first?
well, I'm just,
Second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
you can't do one without 2. Minimally, you need $11 million to do Stengel and Madison, and then you have to decide whether or not you want to do any improvements more for Jefferson and Franklin.
Why is recommendation 1 listed separately than recommendation 2 then?
Because we don't have to make the decision on terms of what schools to consolidate, but, you know, you have to make sure that you have funds to do 1, and that's 2. And I'm saying, you know, we're recommending because of the return on investment, but we could pare that back. I'm just saying critically, you need to have what is targeted there for Stengel and Madison, which totals $11 million, if I'm recalling
So
correctly.
you're arguing against the motion.
I'm saying it would be, you know, recommending, you know, those 2 together with some, because you got to be able to fund it. Otherwise, you're looking at 3 or 4 years down the road in terms of doing a consolidation and saving that money.
I'm not for borrowing. That's my opinion.
You're not for more.
Does that make sense, Tony, in terms of what I,
So you can't really do one and capture those savings without doing two at the same time.
because you got to prepare those other properties.
And we could fund that through savings. It's gonna more or less pay for itself if we execute on it.
That's my sense, because, you know, we're getting down to critical needs that have to be addressed, and now, you know, and so if you don't have to incur that, you know, that, what you would pay for that critical need now just becomes part of your solution in paying for that borrowing.
Right. And the payments are $1 million a year.
Can I, John? And the borrowing would have no impact to taxpayers. At least not additional,
Right.
not additional,
Right.
just so the taxpayers are aware.
Which is, it was an obligation that we incurred that we have to pay back.
Right, and while we're doing all this concurrently, we could stay on our path of increasing achievement and building the case in the community for the inevitable larger capital referendum.
Okay, good luck.
I would, I'm sorry.
He's got a
Sorry,
question.
I'm sorry. I would like to amend my motion to approve recommendation 1 and recommendation 2.
I'll second that.
Did you second it
I seconded
previously?
it.
Okay, all right, so you're friendly to the amendment.
My question now is to John. Can you, is that a hard and fast 11 million, you think, obviously, to get Stangl and Monroe ready or good to go? Or is that critical? Is that a holiday list, or is that?
You're looking at recommendation number 2. correct?
Yeah, I'm saying that 11 million, I mean, that's obviously an estimate, but,
The one other flexible option that's in that recommendation, and I know we've talked about it briefly, and again, I don't want to surprise anyone. The Jefferson $4 million enhancement was really to do a 21st century school.
Yeah.
So there is an opportunity if you really need to, you know, push the finance button, you could pull that addition, do those repairs. It's not gonna change the occupancy or the seating demands of the school, but still give you that consolidation a year earlier and give you that savings that I think the district would want.
And I asked John the same thing, is there anything from Franklin that could be taken out? That's a harder one because that building's in more need.
Potentially whittle that down too. But again, this project isn't gonna be set where you sign a number and all dollars are spent. It's gonna be managed as a construction project with a contingency which you own and manage, so.
yeah, so we have the freedom to build and maneuver. That's why I'm trying to say it's not a hard and fast 11 million.
No.
There's still maneuverability and there's still options. And that's, the board will actually be able, if they would like, or the facility and finance committee will have the freedom to make choices within that because of the ability for us to do it in-house or bid it out or to have contracted out. So that's, I just want to be clear about that. Yep.
I need to make a technical correction that it would have taxpayer impacts.
Oh, yeah, what he said.
Just because it would have at least 37 cents on the 1,000 value per house. So right now, if we were to not fully levy and go to what we had budgeted and have the 1.5 million extra that we talked about, that would be about $6.80. And it'd be over $7 if we, you know, use our full revenue limit authority in order to make that borrowing affordable. So that's just important. I just want to make sure that we're not going into the vote thinking that it would not have taxpayer impact when it would.
So it's not truly fully debt, it's the combination of raising our operating referendum is what we're saying.
It'd be using more of our revenue limit authority. You know, we'd be opening it up. So right now, we under levied $3 million this year, so we wouldn't be under levying as much.
Okay.
That's make sure we all know that.
Yeah, that's important.
So could we not, and we're not doing it fully debt because it would cost more, is that what you're saying?
Say that again. I didn't.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess instead of like, is it possible to just, since we're debt free, we've been frugal, probably too frugal for years, if we're gonna be honest about it. You know, is it possible to just put it fully under debt and not go back and raise the revenue limit on the,
then you'd have to go to referendums. Well, I mean, it's gonna hit your tax base either way, you know, so if you
But
do
it's-
Fund 39, you go to your taxpayers and say, we wanna borrow X amount of dollars. So $20 million and on Fund 39 would be about 30 cents, okay? So let's say we go next spring for that much, we could put that under there. And then you have the guaranteed revenue for the full amount of time that you have obligated yourself to that debt, okay? If you do Fund 38, it's just within your general revenue limit authority, so you have to manage that within all of your operating costs, and then that doesn't guarantee the revenues because, you know, you only have what you have guaranteed through your revenue limit and what's approved through the tax base.
That's the election.
So we either vote for it on the front end or the back end, you know, and that's just, when I say by that is Fund 39, you vote on in the beginning. Fund 38, like I mentioned, the budget memo, that we said we have no debt and we didn't talk about any debt through the operational referendum discussions. That's, you know, just how we presented it to the public. Doesn't mean that we can't take on debt. The board has the authority to always do that. Just things to consider.
yeah, thank you. How are we coming up with that 20.6 million? Am I missing something? I'm
Yeah, I see 16.6, that's what
Yeah.
it is.
And I guess that's my first question. And my second question is, what's the maximum amount that we could structure through debt without having an impact on taxpayers, without having to raise that over this?
Well, any that you're adding is gonna have an impact. I mean, just because you're adding on a payment, you're adding on expense, so that's.
Right, but it's not gonna, it's not gonna hit their tax bill directly, right? So if it's structured as debt, then it's just us, like, the district has money in the budget to pay off debt, I thought you said, right? Like $1
No,
million
we
a
don't,
year?
we don't.
Well,
Because we
then,
paid off our debt.
so we have no, but we
We have
could,
no debt right now.
okay, so we have no balance
So-
to pay off anymore debt.
No, we paid it off in last year's in 22-23 budget, so then we have,
Yeah, so I guess what I'm getting at is like,
any
what
cost.
I would like to do, if it's possible, is I would like to figure out a way where we can do this and then people wouldn't see their taxes go up this year. Okay? Does that make sense? So
Yep.
I want their tax bill to stay flat. So is there a way to structure this through debt where their tax bill stays flat this year and next year, like through the rest of the operating referendum?
It's not possible.
Okay, and then also the rest of 20.6 versus 16.6, I don't know.
I mean, you could say like, okay, we're gonna borrow, or we're gonna take on this debt, and then you'd have to reduce somewhere in order to
Right,
keep
so
it.
then we figure that out in our house without having to go to taxpayers and beg for more money. That's what I'm suggesting.
With
Like-
increased
like-
costs and it'd be very challenging. I mean, is it possible? Yes. Would it be, with extensive sacrifice? Yes. So we have $1.5 million we decided to take in additionally to work on projects. So you could say, okay, we're not gonna do those projects anymore, we're gonna cancel that, and we're gonna take on a debt payment, and we're gonna get more, but then you're limiting your operational buildings and grounds, you know, base of money to spend throughout all those years. So then you'd accomplish your goal of not increasing what you're putting out to the tax base, but then you're also creating more deferred maintenance with what you're not taking care of. So,
Can I answer? So what, I think what you're saying, you could take out a fund balance too. I think we have 17 million out of that. So you could take the potential of a conservative number of 500,000 a year from the maintenance of not doing it at that school because you're consolidating that. That's 500 grand for 1 year.
That's right.
Then you could take 500 grand out of your fund balance. That's $1 million. That would cover the payments for 1 year and would not affect the payments for the loan.
Right.
And that would not affect the taxpayers for year one. You potentially could, if the cost goes, I mean, you know what I'm saying? That's what you're asking. That's one solution how to do that.
and you have to be very careful with fund balance. I mean, it's definitely something that if you take out a little bit at a time, or you're very
That's
careful
what I
with it.
Suggest.
But we're at a spot too where we do not have to short-term borrow and have interest just to make payroll. You know, we were able to get through June payrolls without any issue. Where if you, there's probably more districts that short-term borrow and have stuff set up in order to in order to eliminate that process or that need.
Don't we get interest on something?
And you charge interest as well on something like that too, so, yeah.
So, I mean, is that worth thinking through more or
I
talking
don't
about?
know, yeah.
We're getting through Barrett.
Let's,
I would dive into the financial side.
yeah, let's look at a different, slightly different plan.
Well, I just, I think that if we could structure it that way, that would be the ideal. Right? And maybe I misunderstood our conversations in the past, but I was always under the impression that, hey, we have like $1 million in the budget for like repaying debt and we could do that pretty easily.
But what happened when we built the 22-23 budget was that because we had, in order to increase compensation to meet the rising needs and the just inflationary costs, we said, okay, we're gonna be losing our debt payments, so we're going to, use that and pack that into meeting that need. And anytime you get rid of your debt payment and you don't replace it with another debt payment, then it's hard to add in because you're adding expenditure to your budget.
So how much can we pull out of fund balance then? And what do we have in there now?
Overall, we wouldn't wanna pull more than about $2 million out before, we would start having a need to short-term borrow.
A year, or what do you mean, $2
Total.
million all total?
Total over, yeah, if we get to lower than, below $18 million, it's where we'd start looking at each other and thinking, oh, should we put all those bills through this week?
So how much time could we buy if we did that?
With the $2 million,
With fund balance, yeah.
well, you wouldn't wanna take it all out of, what do you mean, just like taking it all out in 1 year, or?
Yeah. Or like, I guess, let's just say hypothetically, we vote and we approve this, $20 million or 16.6 million, whatever, we gotta figure that out, but whatever that amount is, like, and then we figure out what that repayment would be. And in lieu of, going back to taxpayers and asking for more money, we could use the money that we already took from them in fund balance and use that to pay for it. And, that's what I'm getting at.
I'd cover about one payment, 1 year payment, because you're looking at 1.6 for, if we did the schedule over 20 years, or 2.5, then you're, already behind, with one payment, so. And then the operational referendum is good for 4 years. So when we get to 27, 28, that's our final year. When we get to 28, 29, we'd be trained for the finance guys about having enough money.
It seems to me like we have to figure out a way to do this.
Yeah.
Because we've been kicking the can for so long that, it's like, hey, let's just wait till a building collapses and then we have a bunch of, injured kids, because I feel that's the track we're on.
Could you highlight, your expressed concerns regarding the age of the building, regarding safety?
Yeah, I'll gladly do that. One thing I wanted to say before I forget is on the total, that question about the 20.6 versus the 16.6. There's $600,000 in that recommendation for repairs at the high school, necessary repairs. And the remainder is contingency. Those dollars that are listed in recommendation 2 are raw construction dollar estimates.
It's not listed in there, that's why I was kind of wired.
Yeah, so again, let's move that out of the way, I guess. So it's contingency plus approximately $600,000 for high school repairs. As far as safety, as time moves forward, I think we're gonna run into more safety issues. Again, internally, we can look at an example. We could use the pools at the middle school as an example. They're closed now. It was a extreme liability. During the assessment process, we worked with Mike and the district to get a structural engineer in. And I think the costs are about $500,000 each to bring them back to operations, not to bring them back to 21st century educational pools. So the district is taking steps to move on these safety issues. That's a big one. We've got a lot of little ones also the maintenance department's been acting on. But these things are compounding. And that detailed list, again, we've sorted it many different ways, looking at our worst safety concerns, looking at our our biggest functionality issues. We've looked at it from what are the low-cost items, and working with Mike, he's cherry-picked a lot of that stuff out. We've loaded some of that information in your computerized maintenance management system, just so we don't lose it, so that it's part of the operating pending priorities that the district's gonna take on. Again, this is really to push for the savings with consolidation and then getting over the hump of some things that are very questionable from a safety standpoint.
Is there any way that, like, I just see it's either all or nothing with that. Is there any way on that option or recommendation two to do just, I see the Stengel and Monroe improvements for
If you
consolidation.
look at this one, I mentioned the two schools, that need to be due, that Stengel, okay? And so that top one there, you could take off, I mean, based on how we're talking, let's just not do anything more on Jefferson or anything more on,
Franklin or Jackson.
Franklin and, for
And do
for a year.
the improvements that we need so we can
And
consolidate.
maybe even, table Duncan for Lincoln, so that we can create some savings.
That's what I was
And
thinking.
that's 11,000,
Million.
11 million, excuse me.
Right.
Don't I?
We'll take a
So
look at
so
that
that,
right now.
that reduces that, and I'm okay with that, to the extent that that action would create savings for you that you can start applying.
Well, that's what I was saying, is because he was talking about, we got contingency money added onto that. We're also talking about some stuff at the high school. I really want to get to the point where we're using better use of our space and we're saving a little bit of money. And it would be it wouldn't be a levy as far as I can tell, or at least it wouldn't affect our levy if we were to do just that. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, this is a really good.
If we skip that
discussion, I
other
think,
part?
yeah, really good discussion. Yeah.
That's and then we could do, because I don't want my taxes going up anymore either.
No,
So
we wouldn't get any more.
if, let's say hypothetically, we approve recommendation one,
And two,
uh,
with the amendment of.
and, well, I guess I'm just, I guess I'm not crazy about the idea of having to raise that revenue limit, but we might not have a choice.
But if we just did that Stengel and Monroe updates, I mean, we were talking about barely touching it before, just doing the Stengel and Monroe updates at $11 million as opposed to the 20.6, how would that affect Angela, can you possibly tell us how would that impact our revenue at all?
Well, you have to also remember with their operational referendum, it levels up each year. There's already a built-in, like even.
I know that's built in, but I'm talking about doing this, would it affect, like approving recommendation one and portion of recommendation two, that first line?
It would vary how much it would impact it based on the amount. So, let's say
11 million.
11 million, if you go to 5 million, it would impact it even less, and then balance that out, strategically, however.
I mean, can we pull, I know you said it's careful with pulling from fund, but can we supplement and go in there with just taking care of those two schools and pulling from fund, supplementing to where we're not affecting the levy balance? And that right there, I think, honestly, I think all of us could probably come to an agreement on something like that.
Yeah, maybe.
If you got experience with finance?
Yeah, but I'm listening to this conversation going, why wasn't this a proposal coming in? And why wasn't the board involved in this whole process to come up with what you're talking about?
Well, I think
That makes more
Right,
sense to me.
exactly.
I want people to bring recommendations, otherwise I would have no idea.
That's not what we got, man.
Yeah, we got a list of different recommendations and now we can play with it, is what I'm saying. I know you're trying to find fault at certain things, but I would be really upset if somebody said, hey, we need to do something, figure it out. I hire the people that are capable of bringing these recommendations to me. So, and I appreciate that. If he didn't bring recommendations, I would be like, I gotta go back.
I disagree with you, but my problem with the whole process is we didn't talk to people. We didn't talk to taxpayers, we didn't talk to parents.
Well,
and you're okay with that, that's fine.
Oh, but
And I-
we're compounding more and more doing this.
I'm just saying, it's hard for me to support something that didn't
And again,
flushed
what I
out
put in
public.
front of you, we had options to start with. Option one, in my bullet points, I identified you could pare that back. Even though my recommendation would still be for one, to get it down closer to 11 million so that you can consolidate, which means in 2 years, you can, start working towards that $1 million of savings.
And we
That's
still have time to
offsetting
talk,
some of this expense.
so we still have time to talk to people and get their input as to how to consolidate.
There's plenty of time for what schools to pick.
Right.
So we could still do recommendation one and make that work with just the 11 million for Stangle Monroe. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. That there's obviously consequences of not doing some of this other work, but there's consequences if we don't do any action at all. So I'm saying you start saving if you can consolidate some schools here because you're paying for space you don't need.
In 2 years. That's what it says, in 2 years.
Right. And I took the $1 million down to 500,000 because there could be transition costs, so maybe we wouldn't get it in the first year or the second year, take, up to 3, just trying to be conservative, what I estimated that return might be.
So I guess the other question then is, what am I missing on recommendation 2 that we have? I see 20.6 million as the ask.
Right.
But then I add the numbers up and I'm seeing 16.6. So
If you look at this, Tony,
If you take this chart 1 all the way across.
yeah,
Okay.
that's all the expense that adds up to it. You just take those other items off.
You'll see a raw construction cost of 17 million.
Okay.
On the far right-hand side.
Gotcha.
If you look just to the left of that, there's $600,000 of raw construction repair at Lincoln, which isn't in the paragraph on this sheet that identifies recommendation number 2.
Franklin and Jefferson's on there yet too.
And the next column to the right of that 17 million is contingency. So that's gross construction costs with contingency. And then there's an estimated architectural fee also. And we believe you can operate underneath those budgets.
I don't know, we need to craft a new proposal.
Well, yeah, because then it's really.
I think we get down with the budget and, we really get the right, I think we're asking the right questions now. I think we have to integrate the answers into a workable thing so that we can, we're not gonna be able to, race into this and take a big bite out of the problem, but we need to get going. And I think that, we still need to do our democratic duty on this too. And I think that if we consolidate, we'll have more money to work with. And maybe take a more modest loan, prime the pump, get it going, build a relationship with the voters, and then say, wow, we're saving money in every way here. We're getting stuff done in-house. We're really, really doing what Manitowoc people like to hear. We're being really tight with the bucks. And then say, but we really do have really significant stuff. So we're gonna try a referendum. And I don't think we should go for the whole at the same time, the first referendum.
I just don't ever, like the word or hear it.
What?
I get a referendum.
Oh, yeah,
So
well, I
what I'm
hear
hearing,
it, but.
what I'm hearing from you, Carrie, is would you be in favor of motioning or a friendly amendment, because you already motioned, correct? To approve recommendation 1 with only a small portion of recommendation 2, the first line, Stengel and Monroe.
I wouldn't vote for it tonight. I want to see the whole package.
Well, that would be the whole package. You would see that right there, and you change those numbers to 11 million instead of 17. I guess.
Yeah, but that's not the motion that's on the floor right now.
I know, and I'm asking if you would accept a friendly amendment. Otherwise, we are literally just kicking the can. We can kick the can.
Come on, let's stop using that. This is a problem that we've acquired, for us to deal with fairly recently, okay? We haven't kicked anything down the road.
Well,
there may have been criminal neglect over the last 20 years or something like that, but, we're not responsible for that, and we haven't kicked anything down the road. I'm looking for a workable, I'm looking for a workable.
Okay.
A workable proposal here that'll work in this community.
What it, I'd like to get moving on this too, is, I'm just thinking out loud, you know, I would like a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe a alignment between Jim and Angela on some of these numbers, because it seems like we don't really have that right now.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, and Jim, right? John, sorry. You know, if we were to table this and bring it back up in a special meeting later this month, would that give you enough, if we were to come to an agreement by then, would that allow you time to do this?
Yeah, we really want to get an architectural RFP out on the street. That's what we want to do, but we want to make sure we've got funds before we do that.
Okay, so can I make a motion that we?
But we have a motion that's standing unless it's withdrawn.
Well, I would withdraw it and say what you just
Standing.
said.
Well,
And make a proposal. And then, yeah.
I have an idea, but I can't because your motion's on the table.
All right, I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, I make a motion that we table this. It's a recommendation that Jim and Angela come back with another proposal that includes that smaller option that we talked about later on for a special meeting this month. And in the meantime, we can also get on board with what Biff was talking about earlier and developing some sort of a community input.
Yeah, I think we're talking doable stuff now.
So the motion is a table until the special meeting at the end of the month with directives given to superintendent and Angela to come back with an updated recommendation, just including that $11 million and how that goes. And then in the meantime, we can also, I mean, we have committees, we should come up with a way we can get some sort of more information out to the public and gathering more information from the public. That's my.
We should try to have everybody on the board here too.
Well, yeah.
I don't know when
that
Keith is
also
coming
Keith
back.
sometime to come in and.
I'm gonna be out of town the 25th.
I don't know, that's
Tony's
fine.
leaving for Croatia. When?
Are you not gonna be here on the 23rd?
Not gonna be here on the 23rd. I'm coming on the ferry at noon on the 25th.
Okay.
That's honestly, it's like serious family obligation.
Understand, I get it. But if we don't make a decision at this meeting, we really do need to make a decision by the special meeting at the end of the month.
I'm still waiting on the second.
Okay, yeah, nobody seconded it, so
I know.
we're still open on what to do.
So I was trying to tamp down the discussion without a second.
Okay.
No, I'll second it.
Okay, now we have a second. We've already discussed it a bit. Anything else?
And Jim, to reiterate, the motion was to table this until the special meeting at the end of the month with directives to tell you and Angela to come back with another recommendation, including only a portion of that recommendation too, that involves only the money that's needed to consolidate. Okay?
That would be easy to do.
And in the meantime, we could work on something, or we can get with somebody in our communication or whatever to get more information out to the public. And possibly if we can get something back from the public could be as well.
What are you asking to give them? You know, first of all, know that they have the audit, that, you know, that audit was made available immediately to them.
Okay.
You know, if
Or at
anybody
least
needs.
receive some public input, maybe. We could get something out to them. What are your thoughts?
We send something to parents, okay, you know, in terms of, you know, the situation here, in terms of that we have excess capacity, and in terms of what we're attempting to do.
I did see the letter. It didn't, but you know, maybe we could get something that they.
I'm just saying, you know, throwing something out there without, I mean, what do you want me to?
I think we want to focus on the immediate stuff that might be doable.
Which is, you know.
Instead of like talking about, you know, junior or middle schools and high schools
Right.
in
This is
20
doable,
years from now.
Kerry,
you know?
but I know that it's an important thing, especially what Biff was saying earlier, is to receive community
Right,
input.
I think so too.
I
I mean,
mean,
essentially what we would be doing is if we take any of that off of which I'm saying, I'm totally open to that because the critical one is consolidate and save money, so you can start using that.
Yeah.
Anything that's not here just gets rolled over to the referendum, so the referendum gets a little bit bigger unless we say, let's not even do it. But we're planning a lot of engagement with community moving into the referendum discussion. We just saw the importance that we could get started by next summer with
yeah,
work.
without having to increase anybody's tax.
We need a blessing from people out there that.
There you go.
maybe so-
Yeah,
speak
at
for
least
the
this way we
community.
can come back with a different recommendation.
Maybe just a few different iterations of recommendations.
Yeah.
I think would be good.
And that's really easy to do, right, John? I mean, we could have calculated, we suggested because in your head, you can almost do that. I mean, it's contingency and John is identifying their conservative numbers because you don't want to be short. You want to make sure you complete whatever you want to start.
The big parameter that we set was to be able to pull off the consolidation.
Right.
For the savings. So that's kind of the limiting factor in moving through all of these different improvements. But it's not that hard to do.
Just an idea, but maybe we could open up that meeting is just having that the only agenda item. And then having another
Right, have
public
it
input
be a
before-
work session.
Okay.
Having another public input before.
Yep.
Thank you.
I think Matt's hand was up first.
Thank you. Bottom line, though, it's gonna come down to how many million do you wanna invest? You really, if you wanted to speed this up, you could give a directive of how many $1 million do you wanna invest in repairs now, or do you wanna put them out to referendum? So that would be a question to Angela, what do you think we can endure with the manipulation
Right.
of how many million into our financial?
I really need to know
Oh,
a
sure.
top number that we could probably endure without affecting a levy.
We're only affecting a little bit.
Did you have anything?
My question was, so when we get this new proposal, or who's ever sending it out, can we get the numbers on where we are spending the money?
Yeah.
The 11 million, I need to know.
Yeah,
And
really.
if we're not gonna spend some money, I'm a little concerned if we're not doing anything at the middle schools, because they're still there. And the high school needs a lot of work.
Yeah.
I understand what you're trying to do, but there are concerns in those buildings that are now concerns.
Yeah.
That's why I'm agreeing with what the proposal is now, because that addresses that as well. So, and I don't
I
like.
just wanna make sure it's addressed. And
Yeah, because otherwise we're gonna end right back up with this number again.
I know, and that's the thing. I mean, you're gonna add more to it, then it's just talking about recommendation 1 and 2 right now as it is. I mean, I'm trying to come to an agreement to where we could move forward and at least act on this.
And you also understand, and that's why the last item 4 was budget.
Yeah.
You know, you have a $90 million budget. What slack is in there? What reductions could you make if these facilities are so critical?
All right.
Now,
we need to
obviously,
do
that's
that,
someplace we've been trying to provide enough lead time to create savings to work for us. But you have to recognize that we have projected a need that excludes facilities for the most part, which is, I mean, for being a private business manager, I would be responsible not to tell you what your total needs are. That doesn't mean you have funds to do it. You have to go out and figure out, that's referendum planning, that's educating the public, it's engaging them.
Mr. President? I'm sorry.
I was just gonna ask real quick, but I'm assuming that the reason why we never had money in the budget was because we just never prioritized it or never had the.
We figured out what would the taxpayers pay and, you know, for operating revenue and let's make it work, which it didn't, which means we just ignored it. The reality, we didn't educate the community.
For many years.
Yeah,
I make a motion to make a recommendation of 1 through 4.
Well,
Oh, no,
we
there's
have
a
a
motion on
current
the
motion.
sorry.
yeah.
So I think we
Motion
need
to
to get
table
through
with
that
that
first.
second thing on there.
Who seconded? You did?
I did,
Gary.
yeah, I second it.
Any other on that motion?
I think we made some.
Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
1 nay. that carries. I will be working to schedule that at a time where the vast majority of us are available, because I know you have things going on later this month and you do.
I could do it that Thursday.
And I will
I'll
check,
get here by noon.
see if we can get everybody
I
here.
can come over.
That's my time, 12:01. Okay.
12:01. Yeah, it's pretty good. When are you
All
going
right.
over?
We have a lot of agenda,
I know.
so please.
I can.
Okay, moving on to new business. A report out from Vance.
There's a proposed contract to Elevate K-12. It's a program that I believe you talked about before. Did we get the contract on it?
Yes, talked about it, I think it was a month ago already, had the opportunity when Tony was asking me about staffing. And it gave you a heads up what Elevate K-12 is all about. And it is a, they call it active virtual situation. Now remember, it's okay Biff, if I just take this and run with it?
Go ahead.
Remember, this is a situation where if you cannot fill a teaching position, it may be an option so that we can provide, quality instruction to the students. But it's an active virtual situation. So Biff asked about the contract. Got the contract from Elevate K-12. I sent it off to our legal counsel. Legal counsel came back with some modifications, sent it back to Elevate. They accepted all of our modifications. That contract is ready to roll with your approval. We could then start to think about, when I say we, I'm talking about the directors as principals, start to think about, are we going to go forward with, for example, we have 3 math positions that we're really struggling with. Maybe we would go with three positions. They don't necessarily have to be math right now, but 3 positions. Does that help with where that's at?
So I would move that we accept that contract and go into, I guess, to get their services. And I'd look for a second for that.
A second. Thank you, sir.
Questions?
Any discussion on this?
Do we think that this is the correct committee to be in, because it's a contracted service? Can we actually be affecting our personnel quite drastically that are already employed within the district? It's just a question. I'm just.
It's part of personnel because we need to hire people for those jobs. Our goal is to get full-time teachers that we can find and hire, but that's probably not gonna happen.
I found that this one and even the next one with Emergis were things that obviously we don't want to, but it's one of those things that we're faced with this reality right now. And we have to have it, unfortunately.
Just Elevate K-12, I think I've said it before. They're in 150 schools in Milwaukee. They're in Partyville. They're in Baraboo. This was at last year. I did a couple reference checks with Baraboo and Partyville. They were both positive. I think it was, Baraboo was using the person for a chemistry position, the chemistry position. Partyville, I think, was a math position. So relative to Elevate K-12, just so you know, we, the directors, had a virtual with them. Then we had them on site with us. And Lee and I were in that meeting. And Lee and I, given our principalship backgrounds, asked them numerous questions on how this would work. And then we also came back and had another virtual with them with the directors. So we've done a lot of vetting with Elevate K-12. And we're ready to possibly, in the next couple of weeks, make some pretty big decisions relative to this matter.
And I'm sure all of those schools wish they didn't need it.
Correct.
Mike, so just so I understand this correctly, would we be like using this as a contingency if we can't fulfill those hires, or once we commit to them? Or
It would be a contingency. I'm glad you asked that question. So let's say, for example, let's just say we contract with them for 3 positions, 3 teaching positions.
Goes into
Mathematics, for example. And then we find a math teacher, then we have the credit for that position for the entire 24-25 school year. So if something happens during the school year, then we can go back to them and say, hey, and we use that credit.
We already paid for it, so whenever we need it, we'll be able to use it.
There's some flexibility.
Yeah, that's the first thing I asked.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, to address the needs, so.
Are there any administrative guidelines that we are prepared to receive to how we would manage that this as only a contingency to vacancy? Because I don't, yeah, that's my
It's
first.
kind of like how I asked about, are they prepared to do the things that we want them to do, like with SFA
No,
and things?
not- Sorry to interrupt you, but I was speaking, not for them in the contract. I'm saying administrative guidelines from us declaring to our voters that this is a last resort option. Like, so there's some guidelines of where we're using this or not using this to give faith to the staff of the community, the employees of the community, that this isn't an alternative source of.
Correct.
I'm just trying to say, I would like to see some administrative guidelines.
We would have to do some communication. I think that's where, once we decide if we're going to go down this road and what position, what building, we're going to have to do some communication with the staff. Matter of fact, we're going to want the entire staff out there to know what we're doing, but specifically with that building and that staff, and then those parents, obviously, we're going to have to do some communication.
So I started floating this around and I got very negative reviews for this and the staffing, obviously. I understand why you're doing what you're doing, and I support that. However, I don't know if, I think we articulated to the community the real the rabbit that you're pulling out of the hat every day, which you are to us, but I don't think the everyday person is knowing the challenges of the reality we're in. And this is a result of the reality we're in. However, I don't think the response to the public is like, no, we should not do any of this, and this is gonna take away from it. So like, in that reason, I'm gonna be voting no for all of this until I get.
What happens if we don't have?
Yeah,
the
don't have a
teacher?
teacher, yeah.
I just want to know, do we just send them back
The
home and say, go home
administrator,
for math
the
class?
administrator, in the past,
Double up.
the administrator would go in that classroom. That's what normally.
We only have how many administrators per school? though?
There's always more proposed every.
This is an everyday thing.
Yeah.
So I substituted in classrooms if somebody wasn't there. You can't have your administrator teaching every day in a classroom. So, I mean, this is the last
resort
chance to get somebody in front of kids who want to learn. It's not perfect, but at least it's something rather than having no class at all.
Yeah. I understand, I just think it needs to be communicated better with the staff, and there needs to be administrative guidelines around it.
Is that something that you're looking for, like maybe like a ruling or some sort of like what he's saying, say, hey, look,
that's all I'm
we guarantee this is gonna be not a replacement. This is at the absolute last resort.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. That's what my constituents are asking. I mean, they don't want to do this at all. I don't think they know the reality of Mike's job.
And coming back to an administrator filling in, if it's a math position and the administrator was a social studies teacher,
Yeah, true.
or a science teacher, or a physical education teacher, that doesn't even come close to working. But here's what I need you to envision. Let's say any teacher typically teaches 5 sections. Let's say 5 sections is 25. You have 125 students. So if you do not have any source of instruction, you have 125 students that you have to figure out overloads. Taking a class and distributing those kids somewhere, throughout the other classes, the class sizes go up. I mean, there's all kinds of variables that become problematic. And it is ultimately a last resort. It's not replacing our teachers with contracted services. It is not. It is a source of, if this is the best we can do and provide this instruction, and we've got to provide this instruction for our students. I mean, I don't know anything, I don't know any other options. We are, last year, it was, as you all know, pretty chaotic with the resignations and stuff like that. However, it always seemed like that there was options for us relative to hirings. There was always, and I'm just being so blunt and frank with you all. Right now, we are struggling. I do not know where we're gonna find 3 math teachers. We hired, I think, 4 or 5 already, but for the last month, we've just been striking out. We have 2 elementary music teachers, we're striking out. We have 4 spec ed teachers, we're striking out. I mean, we've done everything possible. And so at this point in time, this was a month ago, we started looking at this sort of option because it was like, we may be in that situation that we don't want to be in. And I think we're gonna find that. So, it's the last resort, but.
As long as that's in writing and that, everybody knows that, that's kind of what I was looking for, because I didn't see any attachments to this at all, but I understand what you're saying. It's complete reality checked for many years already.
I was just gonna say what Matt is saying. I mean, I'm all in favor of this. I mean, really, it's the responsible thing to do. It isn't particularly expensive, but, we really have an obligation to offer this, a public school education to anybody that walks in. But I would say, that we need a motion stating that this is, for emergency use only. That it won't be used to, replace the regular process. And that sort of stuff. And I mean, why wouldn't we buy it then? Because, I mean, I trust you.
Is that an amendment?
You may not always be here. Yeah, I'd like to add that on.
I have no problem with that.
And I'll second that again.
All right.
Can you repeat the amendment, please?
That it's an emergency option to provide the education we're obliged, but won't be used to replace the regular process of the search for classroom teachers.
Now, you made it, so now it'll be okay, because if I made it, it would have been.
Well, no, it would have been okay.
I'm just saying the math teachers would be happy because you made it.
Well, whatever, I trust you.
All right, sounds good. Who seconded?
Okay. Anything further?
We got it.
All right, before I call the vote, I just want to say I will not vote for this. I think we saw very clearly at McKinley that virtual schooling is filled with pitfalls. This is virtual teaching. I don't see cost savings because you have to have an adult full-time in the room doing discipline. And sometimes the relationships between kids and aides is not one that's conducive to behavior and discipline. So personally, I admit we need a plan for if everything else doesn't work. I do not believe this is it, so I will be supporting it. Okay? So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no, then nay. Thank you. I just want to get done so that we keep moving forward. Next, it's.
So hopefully this proposal will stop the other thing from even happening. Okay? This is a company that sends us a teacher.
This is the one I was kind of against.
Yeah, but they will send us somebody to our building. Yeah, go ahead, Michael. It's yours.
Yeah.
This is kind of like a service that I guess I look at it as kind of like a headhunter. You tell them, hey, I need a math teacher. And if they have a math teacher that's looking for work, they provide that person. In both of these programs, they are Wisconsin licensed, And then we basically contract with them, and that person that's their employee. That person then becomes basically a math teacher. Let's just say it's at Wilson Middle School, and just one part of the faculty for the year, that sort of thing. So, basically, we wanted to explore, examine both of these options to give us options possibly. So, yeah. And I think somebody said it earlier. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, when you take a teacher in Manitowoc at about $65,000 average, plus the full benefit package, we usually cost them out at about 100,000. These situations are not costing us any more than what that would cost us. So, you know what, so that was surprising to me, because I was really worried about, oh my gosh, we're gonna have, sticker shock from this situation, so.
So our administrator has the ability to pull somebody out of the classroom if they're not up to our standards, our quality. Again, it's a way to fill those gaps that we're not.
Basically like a temp agency for any other company.
Yeah, right.
And that's why I don't like it. If I was to say something, you know, it's not gonna be in a popular opinion, Mike, forgive me for saying this, but this is your job. Sorry. All educational staffing is what I have a human resource manager for. That's why I didn't like it. And I've been at companies where they have temp agencies, and, you know, sometimes it may fill in like a little bit, but for the most part, it never works. And that's just my own opinion of it.
One of the things, and I'm not overly familiar with temp agencies and what kind of control you have, but when we ask them to, if they have X teacher, X discipline, we get to interview that person. And so after we conduct the interview, we can determine yay or nay. So we do have some ability to manage that situation more than, oh, here's your temp person, good luck. You know, we say, we are interested or we're not interested after the interview and stuff like that, so.
Yeah, I don't know. I hear you on both sides. It's a ugly situation we're in. Yes.
Unfortunately, I do know quite a bit about this because of the healthcare industry's been doing this for a number of years. They just cannot find registered nurses or CNAs, and this has been going on in the healthcare industry because we need services to our elderly people, and they hire staffing agencies, and they come in, and sometimes they do great, and then sometimes they get rid of them. For the essence of me being an educator and went to school, I think this is unfortunately a bad turn for the industry. So I don't want to support it because of that. However, I understand the reality. I'd much rather have a person in the building than a screen.
Yeah.
So in that essence, I'm going to be supporting this.
Yeah. Completely agree.
Yeah.
The reality is where we used to get 40 people apply for a position, we now get very few. It's not just less kids in school, it's less kids in college getting trained, it's less employees all over the place, and
it's ugly.
Hopefully that'll pass and things will get better, but right now, I would rather have a real Mr. Phipps in the room rather than somebody over the computer screen.
So one good thing about this, if you let me, sorry, but obviously the district has the ability to keep that person then and get rid of them quite quickly as well. So there's potential gains and there's potential losses, but that is the versatility of it as well. So, but yeah, thank you for having some common ground.
Yes, sir.
I was just gonna add, you know, it's obviously not a great job market out there for getting new staff and teachers in particular. But, you know, it's encouraging to see that we're thinking outside the box and I think coming up with, you know, contingency plans if needed, so good job.
Right. So did I move? Did we get a second on this? It's been a long night.
Came out of committee though, didn't it?
I'll second it.
All right.
Okay, came out of committee, so.
You're moving it, but Matt's second.
I'm moving it.
Matt's seconding it. Sorry, Mr. Phipps is seconding it. Apologize.
Deal.
Okay, I know, shocked, this one I'll support, and the reason I'll support it is, these are fully certified people. Also solves a problem that we can have sometimes with nurses, with special ed, with other services that are difficult to really fill. And we get to do it literally on an ad hoc basis. So the one thing I don't like about this is the thing that makes perfect sense to me, which is if they send us somebody who's fantastic, it is way too expensive for us to ever buy them out from this company. And they have cleverly figured that out.
And they may want a permanent job instead of it being in a staffing, so you never know.
No.
Yeah, but to buy them out is expensive for us. So they
So you
would
don't have
have
lunch paid
to,
after.
but certainly somebody like that is gonna do 1 year of this, and then they're gonna be getting a job somewhere, whether it's with us or somebody else. But buying them out while they're working for us
Oh,
is
yeah.
financially insane. It is, so.
$5,000.
Is the buyout?
I thought that's what it was.
Depending upon how many days they've been with you, there are percentage add-ons to the annualized starting salary. That's
I guess I was thinking about what I read was after the year, let's say you employed them. They were with us, with Emergis for 1 year, and then we employed them for the following year. I thought it was a 5,000, sorry.
yeah, no, I'm talking about, you just,
During the year.
get a shiny star, and you're like, oh, just stay.
Right.
You know, we can't initiate that without it costing us big bucks. Okay, so all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that's approved.
Next position is the student service interventionist position at Stangl. This is a position where a special ed teacher is going to have some other duties at Stangl.
So,
Clarification from Michael.
yeah, so this past school year, 23-24, Stengel had 2 FTEs, 2 full-time FTEs for special education. We're going to have 1 FTE for special education next year. We want to convert the other FTE from the person that resigned to the student services intervention position over at Stengel. So basically, we got a cost-neutral situation. So that's what we're doing with the FTE. I don't know, Stephanie, do you want to say anything about anything else to this matter?
Well, the FTE is already there, so we're just offering a position. But this position, because we actually have McKinley, and then we have an elementary program, and we have like other programs at this school, so it would help out with all of them instead of just a McKinley.
Would you say that it's actually ended up costing us 7,000 or something?
No, this one's cost.
Oh, this is cost neutral?
This is neutral.
Okay. Motion approved.
Motion. Got a second? Any further discussion?
It's a good idea.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved. Moving
The next position is associate principal position at Riverview. Riverview has 500 kids.
Yeah.
That's more than Wilson.
And only one administrator.
And they are asking for some more administrative help.
So, as I've said, Riverview has, with the early learning program out there and Riverview itself, elementary school, there's like almost 600 students there. And neither one of our middle schools have even 450-ish, somewhere in that vein. So a lot of students. In addition to that, right now our principal out there is 1 to 88 staff members. And if you look at that chart relative to the staff members, you know, most of our administrators are like 1 to 35-ish, 1 to 40-ish, not 1 to 88. So what we're looking at is converting the early childhood coordinator FTE to an associate principal for Riverview and early learning. Basically, the cost about $7,000 to convert that from that position of where we're at there to an associate principal administrative position to help out with more student affairs stuff, to help out with more staff oversight, those types of things.
Motion. Yep, I'll move to bring it to the board.
Okay, do we have a second?
Yeah.
We have a second.
There is a slight increase in salary.
7,000.
Right. Yeah. So you're just aware of that.
No discussion?
Minimal impact for a needed position.
My personal preference, it won't keep me from voting for this, would have been for this to be our early learning principal. So there's an equivalency across the two. I can understand the assistant principal structure. You know, it may help with command structure of a principal and assistant principal over 2 principals. Just saying.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that passes.
The next item, first read of policies introduced, and I will turn this over to Lee. So it's on you.
So we have a slate of policies. This will be the last group of policies that we're bringing through in first read. that require a second read given our bylaw change. These were, it sort of started in that process, so we'll finish it that way. And so the recommendation for these is to approve to second read.
I'll move to do that.
One second.
Second?
Yeah.
We have a motion and a second to move these to the second read.
Yeah.
There's no discussion. You can certainly amend them next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, those move on for next time. And
Lee, you can discuss the next one.
Sure. So before you, there were 3 documents. There were some updates to the Title IX policy. We received word from Neola. I'm sure you were able to look at the memo. Because this is such a meaty thing, and I mentioned before that I'm certainly not a legal expert, we did go to our council for working through the recommendations for this policy. Our council wrote us the recommendations that are before you. In addition to, in summary, he shared that the policy is fairly consistent in terms of the language of the policy from the changes in 2020. The biggest changes relate to the definition of on the basis of sex, and there's no need to address that in this policy as it's considered the law for the U.S. Supreme Court. The new regulations provide the school district with some additional flexibility in terms of the grievance procedure, so that is a welcome change and noted in the policy revision. And so that was the summary, and these are the recommendation on these policies from our council. And the goal is to have these in place by August 1st, which is why it's before you today. Normally, we would require a second read. However, in this case, there is a provision in our bylaws that allow us to take action on an item that has a timeline that's sensitive, which this meets the criteria for that. So our recommendation is for you to approve this policy with the updated changes and the recommendations that we received from our legal counsel.
And why was the August 1st date? Do you have any idea why they put that in?
Yeah, it was set up by the federal government. And so at that point, Neola responded with a flurry. So we weren't the only ones around the state that were scrambling on this. Unfortunately, there were many professional development things, webinars and things that popped up. But given the sensitive nature of the policy and the timeline, we chose to use our legal counsel on this one.
So I will move to approve this,
to set aside the rules.
to set aside the rules and do this. And I need a second if there's one.
Second.
Got a second?
We have a second.
So how does that work? Because I was gonna motion for a second read. I motion that we go for a second read at the end of the month. The reason why I say that is because I just want to ask, because how does that work if they go for that motion right away, but I wanted to either table it to the next meeting or at least have another read of this. And the reason being is because we've already had, 7 days ago.
Yeah, I'm about to answer your question.
7 days ago, there was a court decision in the federal government in Topeka, Kansas, that outlawed any changes to these whatsoever via Title IX and any of the changes by those separate states. Now, that's not including us, but it does include another group of students within those states. Now, there's several other court cases that are going on right now, and I'd imagine, to be honest with you, it could very well change by the time the next month comes up. So unless we're gonna say that it's not implemented for sure until then, or we're not actually making the changes until that very date, I would say we go for a second read.
I can, please. What you can do right now is you can move to table. Because table is, even though it's a different motion, it takes precedence.
Okay,
so we have to do the table motion first. It overrides the motion that was made.
I do have a point of clarification that may help.
I just want us to get where we're headed. So we have motion table, now your clarification.
The point of clarification is that you can absolutely do, in fact, on the thing, it says it doesn't take effect till August 1st. So
Motion.
by your taking
I read
action.
the whole thing. They wanna have the elections, they wanna have the results of the election before this is implemented. I read through it, it said none of this will be enforced until after the November election. So I wanna clarify that maybe they want us to have it on the books by August, but none of this takes effect until the results of the election in November. That's what I read in here. Is that correct? Because that's what I read.
That is not what I believe to be true, but
Okay.
I may be wrong.
So we have a motion to table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Oh, we have a second. We have a motion table and second?
Discussion or?
On the motion to table.
Oh.
Strictly on the motion to table.
Yeah, I'm curious, Lee, and I don't know if you know this or not, or if you could find out, but would it be possible to get what WASB's doing on this? Because I know they had, when that attorney came and spoke to us, he said that they had policies too. So I'd just be curious what other groups are doing. I know we work with Neola, but
Well, for this one, we worked with our legal counsel. Mark Capricious from Von Briesen and Roper is the one that did these recommendations.
Okay.
But yes, I can find out if WASB, if the person that was with us has any particular recommendations that differ from this person, they're willing to do that.
And then I guess I would further, if I can.
If you're going to confine yourself to the motion to table, I'll happily allow it, but that's supposed to be the rule because he's preempted the original motion. So your exchange with Lee would have been appropriate after the motion to table either carried or failed. So I'm just trying to keep us on the motion to table. So if this is helping you with the motion to table, I understand that. And I'm not trying to be mean, I'm just trying to get us.
No, that's fine. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
Okay.
I'd like to know, I'd like to know the reason for the motion.
I just told you, of all the
Well,
court
tell me
cases that are
again.
coming out, and as of right now, there's a court case that only came out 7 days ago from the federal government in a different district though. It's including for Kansas, Alaska, Utah, and Wyoming. And it includes every school that has, every school attended by the members of the Young America Foundation and Moms for Liberty and some other groups. So they have, those people are all covered in that. Now, that doesn't, from what I understand, doesn't cover in Wisconsin, but I'd like for Jim to find out, or at least ask maybe our attorney and see, because they've actually succeeded.
You anticipate?
It's funny, but it's actually succeeded in a federal court.
Yeah, okay. But you anticipate there'll be a change here before August 1st?
Absolutely. Well,
maybe
not August 1st.
Okay.
But I mean.
I just don't know what it, I don't know what it
Does that cover everybody? Does that cover just that specific group? Does this cover those states? I don't know. But I do know that all this is doing is dragging more attention to stuff that's, we already have covered in our policy. We're gonna make 13 different policies about the same thing.
Well,
whatever.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion to
Just for
table?
tabling. That's just for our table.
Okay, all those in favor of tabling? And before I do this, my only thing on tabling is I always will be in favor of, unless we're in the house and the house is on fire, of us taking more time to make a decision. So all those in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
Right.
Okay, that carries 4-2. And we will
So we
return to
move
that.
on. Okay. The two things left to be decided are the course proposed that complements and then reinforces the disciplinary and the personal development of students already kind of embedded in the Success for All program. If you've looked at the proposal, I mean, it really does cover a lot of things that need to be covered. And I know, it was not, there was a split vote in the committee on this. I'm not exactly sure, I can't remember why.
Wait a minute.
Tony and
What are you
Matthew
looking at right here?
Phipps
Oh,
voted nay. Can
We
you,
just weren't able to access the links.
oh, you weren't able to access the
We
links.
were able to access them now, so.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this proposal.
I'll second.
Of course, of course.
this is the SEL one, right?
Yep, SEL.
It was late when I was reading that.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll second.
Who's the second? We have a second, okay. Any further discussion on this? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so
All
that
right.
concludes
And
your
now-
report out, unless you wanted something else you wanted to talk about. from
There
the
is a
meeting.
student
That-
credit.
That is on there
Academic,
after
yeah.
you. You're B, that's.
I'm B. Oh, that's C. Yeah,
Yes.
okay, I'm sorry.
Okay,
All
so,
right.
so C, and the last official thing on here is student academic standards for the 24-25 school year.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm sorry, can I just want to clarify that Biff was not here for the vote on the SEO.
Yes. Yes, he was not.
He was, okay.
Give it a pass then.
Okay, and this is on here specifically because state law, specifically state statute 120.21, parent 13, parent B, says annually, include as an item on the agenda for the first school board meeting of the school year, a notice that clearly identifies pupil academic standards adopted by the school board under statute 11831GA. That will be in effect for the school year. Now, I point this out because it says it has to be on the agenda. It doesn't necessarily have to be passed, but we can have some conversation about it. I know that the directors are planning on us looking at this in August. And I also want to point out that we are doing it because it's required by state law, and we'll follow state law because we're not Milwaukee. You know, it's a shame the news people weren't here for that joke, but that's just how life
One is, one's there.
Thanks, buddy.
Are you
Okay,
saying we should
so-
vote on this?
So, I do know there were some things that Mr. I wanted to talk about under this, and I certainly want to give you that opportunity, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was hoping that we could start the discussion, and I'm not sure if we can, underneath this agenda item, but I'll try it. Last year, we established district priority goals, which I felt were a good way to keep us focused and accountable throughout the year on the most important things. And I strongly urge my peers to consider doing the same process over again. And I would like to do that, if we can at least start that process this month, prior to me leaving. I'd like to be a part of that. Otherwise, it's gonna be hard for me to do it in that first August meeting. But last year, I felt we made really good progress in raising reading scores. Obviously was one metric, but we also got the facility study done, and you know, we made some progress with the culture. That's kind of an ongoing thing, but long story short, I feel that we should really take some time to talk through that as a group and prioritize the big things that we have on our plate, and just to make sure that our time in meetings, as much as possible, is allocated towards those biggest things, and not just you know, getting in the weeds on little things that aren't going to move the needle as much.
Okay. Yeah, and certainly, because it was one of our 3 primary goals, the reading scores absolutely falls under academic standards too.
Yep.
And the other goals contribute, I think, to our standards and our success. So I don't know if you wanted to suggest some now, if you're looking for this to be picked up through curriculum and instruction.
Yeah.
Or.
We could do that, yeah. I mean, that's.
Yeah, for sure.
If we could do it in committee, but I would imagine like the overall goals would probably be outside of that too, right? So they wouldn't all be around that, but some of them, yeah, obviously the I guess the building's, a big part of finance, but I would imagine that would be a big part of it too. I think that figured out.
Yes, sir.
I would just like to add to that, that I would make a recommendation to the board in terms of where administration's at, in terms of recommending priority goals for your consideration in that process.
Great.
You can come to the committee meeting. I mean, we talked about it while Tony was exercising. And we're gonna try to get it on the last committee meeting. But the agenda came out before, the idea had been expressed. But yeah, I think we should do that.
And is your concern availability for August?
Yeah, ideally, I'm gonna be in Europe, so the time change makes it difficult.
Okay,
I
sure.
prefer to do it not at 7 hours ahead of this time.
Right, absolutely. Okay, so we'll see what we can do to get that in.
We can do
Where
it
it
in
works
late
for
August.
everybody.
Do it in late August, right?
Okay.
Good, yeah.
All right, any other business for the good of the whole?
Is there any action on the student academic standards that were presented?
No.
Okay, so is it?
We're going to continue to look at it.
Unfinished business next time or what?
Yeah, it would roll over to unfinished or old business, whatever you want to call it. Yes, sir.
Future meeting date?
Right now, I know that we want to have one near the end of the month. My goal will be to get everybody at that one, so I'll have to see whether we can get everybody in. I'll let you know, but it's gonna be late in July. Very clear.
I thought you said the 27th, because you're coming.
I'll be back the 25th. Tony's
You're
leaving
not-
the
I'm
27th.
leaving the 27th, so I
We
can,
could have it on the 25th.
that's Friday.
Which is a Friday, yeah. Or we could have it on the 25th.
If you're okay doing it that night.
The
when you get back.
25th in the evening?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'd do that. yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's not that much jet lag between Ontario.
I don't know.
All right, well,
I have to check my calendar.
We'll check with everybody and get clarity.
How about facilities and finance?
Yeah, I was gonna talk to you after this meeting, see if what we covered here covered that, or if you need something more, so that we can set that up if you want. But again, we're gonna be struggling with availability of people.
But
But we
the
can make it
meeting on the 25th is just a one agenda item, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's clear that we're not having a facilities and finance meeting this month after that whole presentation we just had for 2 hours.
That's what this meeting will do.
Yeah, I just want everybody to hear that on tape.
Yeah,
So-
I did not say that, but if that's what you heard, okay.
Well, I just asked if there was a meeting scheduled, and there's not one right now. So,
Yeah.
that's the truth. Thank you.
Okay.
But we have one in late August. I mean, in late July.
It's fine.
How about you, motion?
I move we adjourn.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.